wrapped up what the Boulder Police Department wanted to tell us.
All of us that wanted to pursue the intruder were being removed from the case.
And he just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. And I did. And he said, that's where you start. All but one person on that list is innocent. Then you got your killer.
The reason I think it continues to resonate is because we just don't know what happened. She was a spark plug in her family. That's how I looked at her. She kept things alive and going.
She was a ball of fire. She was always very caring and spiritual. She could stand on her head. She could hula. She could rollerblade. And she just recently learned how to climb a rock wall.
She was a 6-year-old girl, somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, and she was taken from us in a very violent way. What justice for JonBenét? That's why the case endures.
Until the day we die, we'll be looking for the person that murdered our daughter.
In 1996, a little girl named JonBenét Ramsey was 6 years old.
She was, thanks for tuning in. My name is Jessa.
And I'm Lexi.
And we're sisters.
I think there's a new generation who's into the JonBenét Ramsey case, who were her age and were told to stay inside by their parents when she was murdered.
I think, yeah, growing up it scared me a little bit because we were the same age and, same state and blonde hair, blue eye, it was a little bit scary.
I remember thinking that I could not believe that this happened so close to our home. You think that your home is safe, that this place is safe, and you just don't think that it could have happened here, and it did.
The murder took place sometime between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 5:30 a.m. on December 26th, 1996.
They know a lot about the case. My 2 girls, they loved their grandfather.
Our grandfather was a detective on its perspective.
Lou Smith was a really legendary detective from Colorado that was brought in early to investigate the homicide.
Once he got a hold of the case, he never let go, and he
was media of the JonBenét Ramsey case.
My name is Lou Smith. I'm a retired homicide detective from the Colorado Springs Police Department, and I have worked the Ramsey case now for approximately 10 years. What I'm going to do today is to just show a presentation that was made back in 1998.
He had a history of closing cases. He had a 90% success rate.
He advocated for the victim and stood in their shoes.
So that's why we've chosen the Victim's Shoes as our podcast name. This really meant something to him, and he really felt he needed to find the killer of this little girl. And he needed to do that for JonBenét.
And first and foremost, we wanted to continue our grandpa's legacy. That was one thing he asked for before he died. He wants the case to remain alive.
There's a saying here in Colorado that Boulder is 30 square miles of fantasy surrounded by reality.
It's very wealthy. It's well-to-do. Boulder looked like something out of a storybook in many ways, especially the neighborhood in which the Ramseys lived.
John and Patsy Ramsey lived in a 6,700 square feet Tudor there on 15th Street.
What I'd like to do first is to just talk a little bit about the Ramsey family. John Ramsey had interest in sailing and flying. Patsy Ramsey was the mother.
John and Patsy Ramsey had 2 children together. Their firstborn was Burke, 9 years old, and JonBenét, 6.5, in kindergarten.
I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a wife and a mother. John used to tell people that I invested in futures, the futures of my children. That's how I usually answer my occupation.
My name is John Angel Ramsey. JonBenét's half-brother. JonBenét would go around and ask everybody how their day was and what they did, and he was just an energetic and fun kid.
By all accounts, they were a happy couple. Patsy was a high society woman from Atlanta. John was a smart guy who had just been nominated or voted as Entrepreneur of the Year.
Patsy Ramsey was a stylish woman. She was a former beauty queen, Miss West Virginia. Oh, that is interesting because the case had gained so much attention because JonBenét was in pageants. By the time JonBenét was 4 years old, she was in the pageant system with big hair and lots of makeup.
I think it starts with the video of JonBenet. It starts with the fact that you have this beauty pageant video of a 6-year-old. That is where this starts, is people start saying, what's that about? How could that have played in?
I think it also touches on parents who have young kids, like, could this happen to me?
I really believe that if we hadn't seen the beauty pageant photos of JonBenet Ramsey, it might have just gone, we saw the beauty pageant pictures.
Hello, I'm Patsy Ramsey. This is JonBenet. She's 4, Burke is 7.
Well, Christmas seemed to be kind of a crescendo for our family. It just became this moment that we all look forward to, and it's a day of peace and quiet.
Christmas was Patsy's favorite time, and she really went all out. She had a Christmas tree for every room, and every tree had a theme. The windows were done with garland, the staircases had garland, there were red ribbons everywhere.
Everything was about entertaining, and she loved people. She loved to make people feel good.
And from all of us at our house to everyone at your house, Merry Christmas and the happiest of New Year's.
There was plenty to celebrate in the Ramsey home. Patsy Ramsey had recently been declared clear of this ovarian cancer that she had battled. And that was a huge relief to come back from stage 4 cancer. Plenty to celebrate that Christmas.
So on Christmas Day, the Ramsey family opened presents at their home that morning. Patsy made pancakes, JonBenet rode her bike around on the patio, and both JonBenet and Burke had friends over to play that morning.
The kids went outside to play with their friends with their new presents. They were going to a friend's house for dinner that night.
We were going to leave early the next morning for a trip to our summer cottage in Michigan. It was going to be the first time we'd gotten all of our family together in Michigan for kind of a post-Christmas celebration. So we came home, went to bed. JonBenet was asleep when we arrived home. We took her to bed, got Burke to bed, set the alarm, and went to sleep.
The next morning, Patsy was up first.
You get up, you're dressed. What happens?
I went down our steps from our bedroom to the 2nd floor. Then I started walking down the spiral staircase. And as I came to the bottom of the stairs, there were 3 pages neatly laid across one of the runs of the stairway.
She picked up the note and she started to read it.
I just remember when I read, "We have your daughter," it just, this overwhelming fear.
And then
I just screamed for John. Screamed.
We were kidnapped. Hurry, please explain to me what's going on. What's your name? Are you Patsy Ramsey, mother? Oh my God!
I was the call taker that night shift when the call came in.
Police, what's on 5515th Street? What's going on there, ma'am? We were kidnapped. Hurry, please explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left in our daughter's phone. There's a ransom note here. It's a ransom note? Oh my God! Please.
She's hysterical. She says there's a kidnapping.
Please. Okay, I'm sending an officer over, okay? Do you know how long she's been gone? No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
the note said, if you do anything, if police come, if FBI come, your daughter will die. You call 911.
I had to do something. I had to take action.
And I mean, all this happened in a matter of moments.
Patsy calls 911 at 5:52 a.m. and the first officer arrives at 5:55.
Wow, that's fast.
I know, that's really fast. More friends.
She's in the hands of a madman.
My phone rang. Pam, they've got her. What do you mean they've got her? They've kidnapped JonBenet. She's gone.
What was the atmosphere like as you sat and waited?
Well, it was awful. First of all, we didn't know whether the kidnapper was going to call that day because the note said, I will call you tomorrow. Get plenty of rest. I was deathly afraid that tomorrow was in fact the 27th.
You lose all perception of time, of place. You've just been dealt a horrible, crushing blow.
The police came in just before 6 o'clock in the morning. on the 26th of December, thinking that we had a missing child. They go into this beautiful house with 18 or so rooms.
And they did a cursory search of the residence, and they didn't find anything.
The mistakes they made were outrageous, they were mystifying, they were mistake after mistake after mistake.
The police did a terrible, terrible job securing that scene. And if you don't secure the scene, you don't get good evidence. People were streaming through that house. They were in the kitchen. They were in the living room. There were some friends of Patsy's that were helping her wipe up the kitchen. There could have been fingerprints there.
You had friends that were Windexing the sink and washing dishes. And
People were making toast in the kitchen. And yes, a kidnapping is a crime scene, but we were so focused on getting JonBenet back. That was the task.
what we have learned is that everyone should have been sequestered into an area so that people weren't roaming around the house.
And that was a mistake on my part. The reason I didn't is because these people were the Ramsey's support system. There was no information at all to indicate the family was involved at that point.
It was a crime scene, and it was getting contaminated. The note was being passed around and reviewed by all of their friends.
Of all of the evidence left behind, that ransom note is the most baffling. Number one, it is too damn long. A ransom says, I have your child, I want $1 million, I'll call you later.
This is the infamous ransom note. It begins,
Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully.
It was 3 pages long, and some people believe that a kidnapper that was truly kidnapping somebody would have written a very direct and to-the-point ransom note.
3 pages? What was that about?
That ransom note was the War and Peace of ransom notes.
Who would write a 3-page rambling ransom note other than someone trying to cover their tracks who was in the house?
It's the weirdest ransom note I've ever read. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills.
You think about this number and how is it relevant, and it's relevant because John Ramsey got a bonus from his company for $118,000. How many people knew that? I'm going to guess not a lot of people.
Our grandpa compared the note to some examples that he found in movies.
John's and even the note that was written in that particular movie.
If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies.
If you talk to anyone, I don't care if it's a Pekingese pissing against a lamppost, the girl dies.
You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John.
Do not attempt to grow a brain.
Our guy's a real watcher of that particular type of movies.
Dan, what does this tell you in terms of evidence?
First of all, that someone felt comfortable spending the time writing this long note in the house.
And whoever wrote the note is about to go from a kidnapping suspect to a murder suspect.
The ransom note had indicated there would be a call between 8 and 10 a.m.
And the police prepped me on how to respond to a phone call, and very important that you hear JonBenet's voice.
Police officers were leaving at 9:30 and 9:45 before that time period of the phone call had even expired. One lone detective was left on the scene.
Detective Linda Arndt is left behind in the house with John and Patsy Ramsey.
She didn't have extensive homicide experience managing a kidnapping and what was about to unfold. This was likely pretty overwhelming for one lone police officer.
Everyone is cleared but the family friends, and advocates, and the detective.
So nobody was cleared.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me because everyone should be cleared from the scene.
The house is full of people. So this is a crime scene that is now being destroyed piece by piece.
I was praying. Linda Arndt had said to me, we're hopeful that the kidnappers will just drop JonBenet off someplace. And I kept looking out the window, clutching this cross, and just imagining that she was going to come running down the street.
for a telephone call from the kidnapper. What's going to happen next?
10 o'clock comes and goes, and there's no acknowledgement that the deadline imposed by the author of the ransom note is come and gone.
Nobody seemed to mark it or freak out about it. She noticed John Ramsey checking his mail in the kitchen and thought that was odd.
Linda Arndt tells the restless John, why don't you look around the house, see if anything's missing or it looks strange.
Check the house, top to bottom, small room.
I knew instantly what I'd found. I'd found my daughter. Immediately knelt down over her, felt her cheek, took the tape off immediately off her mouth. I tried to untie the cord that was around her arms. I couldn't get the knot untied. Picked her up, and I ran upstairs and laid her on the floor and still had a hope that she was alive.
And I see John Ramsey carrying JonBenet up the last 3 steps from the basement. She looked like it. And John leaned down opposite, and he asked if she was dead. And I said, yes, she's dead. And as we looked at each other, I remember, and I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting, I've got 18 bullets. Why did you do that? Because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up.
She clearly felt in danger. At that moment, she made it clear that she thought that John Ramsey killed his daughter and that they might kill her. It was shocking to me that she would think that.
How is it that you have all these cops searching a home and nobody finds the body, but you ask John Ramsey to go look for things out of the ordinary, and he finds his daughter in a room that had never been opened by anybody in law enforcement? That's crazy.
He lays her on the living room floor where just a few minutes before, friends and neighbors have been walking and, bringing in fibers and whatever to contaminate the scene. And then the coup de grace. He grabs a blanket, which is full of who knows what kind of contaminants, and throws it over the body.
Patsy was being kept out of the room, and I didn't want Patsy to see JonBenet laying there like that.
I remember walking in and seeing her lying there in front of the Christmas tree. I knelt down over her and just laid my body on her body and my cheek against her cheek, and it was cold. And Father Raw was there, and he started saying the last rites, I believe, and I just kept saying, no, ask God to raise her.
So the kidnapping of JonBenet has turned into the murder of JonBenet.
The ultimate cause of death was strangulation with something called a garrote
On her neck. And that tells me she was alive when she was garroted.
There were signs that JonBenet had also been sexually abused. This death was for her.
A person that would do this to a 6-year-old in this fashion clearly is into sort of sadistic behavior, that they like torture to a certain extent.
There was no evidence of a break-in. There was no jimmying on the front door. There were 4 people in that house, and 1 died overnight. From the very beginning, they suspected the parents.
Within minutes of JonBenet's body being found, this was who they were going to go after. And that's what they did.
The police are thinking, we gotta talk to those parents, and we gotta talk to them right now before they start getting their story straight together.
They brought JonBenet's body out past the candy canes that were decorating the front of the house, and there were only like 2 reporters outside to capture that. And then the storm happened.
JonBenet Ramsey, the little girl in Colorado, was murdered.
Beauty queen JonBenet. JonBenet's murder has frightened residents of Boulder.
News outlets from around the world had descended upon Boulder and were just hiding in trees and bushes and digging through our trash, following me around town. I mean, it was war.
The JonBenet Ramsey case was completely out of control. control.
You also have to remember the O.J. Simpson case had wrapped up. The 24-hour news cycle, their content had dried up. And so along came the Ramsey family, and we fit right into that slot.
JonBenet Ramsey was a precocious 6. She had been strangled to death in the basement of her own home.
You have the and then you have these videos that surface. Of this beautiful young girl. Dancing in her costumes, and those were the first viral videos.
She might become an Olympic ice skater.
It's part of what turned it into an international circus.
Now we have Instagram and we have Snapchat, but back then, this was one of the first moments in time where something truly went viral. This little girl's image was everywhere overnight.
The biggest negative factor about John and Patsy Ramsey was that they had allowed their daughter to be in child beauty pageant contests, and people did not like them.
As our grandpa stated, this was a brutal, premeditated murder, not just a little doink on the head covered up by perverted staging.
It seems unimaginable. Patsy's clothing.
And that was very, very important. But there are problems because
for separate interviews, for examination of their body for defensive wounds, for collection of their clothing. That never happened.
At this point, they haven't interviewed the mother or father. Not surprisingly, they're still very grief-stricken. They've not been in any kind of condition to be interviewed.
A couple of days after he finds his daughter's body in the basement, police speak with John Ramsey, but this is not a formal interrogation.
My father, myself, we all marched into that police station, gave blood, we gave hair, we gave fingerprints. The thing that really stuck with me is 2 detectives hand me their business cards, and one says narcotics officer, and the other says auto theft. And I bury my head into my hands, because I knew at that point we were in a bad spot. Boulder police didn't have the resources to solve a complex homicide.
John interviewed with Boulder police. Patsy's doctor said she was too medicated and unable to get out of bed.
The police were faced with lawyers and wealthy friends, people in the community who told the police, please give them room, they're grieving, what's the matter with you?
Though the police had spoken to the Ramseys, what they really wanted to do was formally interrogate them.
The police are thinking, we gotta talk to those parents, and we gotta talk to them right now before they start getting their story straight together.
Your lawyers advised you then not to submit to police questions. Why not, people say? Wouldn't you have wanted to tell them everything?
Well, I don't recall that our lawyers told us that at the time. We said, yeah, we want to keep working with you, but can't you hear? We can't go out. Patsy was in bed. Patsy was barely able to move. We were perfectly willing and anxious to work with the police to find the killer. We had a higher priority at that point, and that was to bury our daughter.
The family is flying the body back to Atlanta for burial.
On New Year's Eve, JonBenet was laid to rest just outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
This service is in loving memory of JonBenet Patricia Ramsey.
We flew back to Atlanta to bury JonBenet, Atlanta being our home. Atlanta being where my oldest sister Beth is buried.
We give thanks today for JonBenet, for the love that she had for her parents.
I want to go back to the funeral.
Whatever we do, we're going to go through it together. We may not get far, but sure as the star, wherever we are, it's together.
Wherever we are, it's together.
We sang that. She and I sang that together. We'd sing it driving in the car, and we just knew that we would always be together in everything. I wanted my children to know that I was with them through thick and thin, regardless of what happened in life. Unconditional love.
Oh, look at that. You can go places now.
Every murder case that I've ever done, the parents are so grief-stricken, but they sometimes make a nuisance out of themselves at the police department.
The Ramseys, literally the day after JonBenet's funeral, sit down for a television interview.
The next thing the police knew, they were on CNN.
don't interrogate the Ramseys, but they remain the main suspects.
Many people found the Ramseys' behavior peculiar, suspicious, weird, off balance, and from that thought, they must be guilty.
When you realized that you two were the prime suspects, what did you think? What did you feel? What did you say?
Well, we were outraged. We were shocked. How could they think that? We were a normal family.
I just didn't believe it. You just can't believe it. I mean, you were suffering from having lost our child. And then for someone to accuse you, it's just, you can't believe that would happen.
A lot of people said, if that were me, I'd be on the steps of the police department finding the murderer of my daughter. Then they go on CNN and say they didn't do it.
If anyone knows anything, please help us.
We've sensed from our friends that this tragedy has touched not just ourselves and our friends, but many people.
As a mother, my heart went out to this couple.
If I were a resident of Boulder, I will tell my friends to keep your babies close to you. There's someone out there.
But my journalistic brain said to me, this isn't right. They should be talking to the police, not the public.
Boulder Police Department wanted to tell us about what they were doing in the JonBenét Ramsey case.
For the most part, the police were very tight-lipped in this thing. They didn't tell us a lot of secrets. They didn't leak a lot of information. Other than broadly, we think the mom did it.
People who believe Patsy killed their daughter believe it was over bedwetting and then staged to look like an intruder.
The bedwetting theory was a big theory at the time. The bedwetting theory suggests that Patsy was angry with JonBenét and killed her because the bed was wet.
I'm a cancer survivor of stage 4 cancer. When you are standing on the brink of death with a terminal illness, your priorities suddenly line up. Bedwetting is totally insignificant. I love my children. I wouldn't harm them for anything in the world.
But Americans were fascinated with the possibility that the Ramseys might have done this.
What happened in that house? Did she go berserk and hurt JonBenét, by accident, not on purpose certainly? Did Burke hurt her by mistake and cause her death?
It was leaked by Boulder police that it was possible that Burke Ramsey's voice was on the 911 call that Patsy had made.
Patsy?
The 911 operator believed that she heard an unexplained voice at the end of the 911 call.
Patsy Ramsey has put the phone down, but she hasn't hung it up. And the 911 recording continues.
I heard her saying, okay, I've called the police, now what? And I thought, And then I heard two people talking to her, and I heard a male voice respond, and then I heard a more faint voice respond.
Some speculated at the time that faint voice might have been Burke, but the family denied it, saying he was asleep at the time. We asked an expert to weigh in on the call.
My name is Ed Primo. I'm an audio-video forensic expert, and I was asked about what people have heard throughout the years from this 911 call. Here we go.
What's your name? Are you there with number? Oh my God!
So when Patsy is speaking to the operator, we could clearly see bright yellow and orange colors. And as I zoom in to the recording here, I can see the formants. This is a visual representation of sound. The brighter the color, the louder the volume. The sound changes right here, the section in question where people are hearing voices. We can see some sounds, but we don't see the formants like we saw over here. So I can't rely on those being words. There's just not enough signal-to-noise ratio in order to be able to perceive what those sounds are. They could be noise, and they could be voices. I just can't, as a scientist, arrive at a reasonable conclusion.
The Secret Service and the FBI also concluded that no additional conversation is audible.
I think we've given way too much weight on whether or not Burke Ramsey was present when Mom makes the 911 call.
Abuse or neglect of their children.
All the evidence shows me that up until this point, they were devoted parents.
Would you get up in the middle of the night and slaughter your child? We're parents. We love our children.
There's so many puzzle pieces here that just don't fit.
Do you really think your daughter's murderer will be found?
Yes, I do. Because the killer has never been pursued. An objective, wide investigation hasn't taken place. The parents have been focused on. That's all that's been done.
He might be an unknown entity then. Not one of the suspects we've all been currently talking about and dissecting.
I don't think it's any of the suspects we're talking about.
What we know is that just within a few mile radius of the Ramseys' home, there was approximately 38 to 40 sex offenders in that area. And the question is, have they all been completely vetted?
Was it an accident? Was it intentional, premeditated?
I want to say something to the person or persons that took this baby from us. The list of suspects narrows. Soon there will be no one on the list but you.
Our killer is John Benet. How many victims has he had in the past? How many victims is he going to have in the future?
The grand jury couldn't point the finger at one or the other, but they were convinced that it was one of the two of them and that the other one helped.
Go back to the damn drawing.
There was a person seen right across the lawn of the Ramsey house.
Lou dedicated a big part of his life to finding John Benet's murderer. Detective Lou Smith was like, whoa. He just said, I have a name on the Jean Benet Ramsey case.
First officer arrives at 5:55. Wow, that's fast. I know, that's really fast.
Lou Smith's family believes that all but one person on that list is innocent.
We're in better position today than we've ever been to solve the John Benet Ramsey case.
John Benet was an entertainer. She would entertain at the drop of a hat.
She loved to sing and dance and perform. It was a natural for her.
I competed with John Benet. She had all these wonderful costumes and outfits, and she had this presence.
Third runner-up, John Benet.
It wasn't really a competition to her. It was more of like, this is fun. Like, let's go on stage and do that.
My name is Jean Benet Ramsey, and I'm 5.5. What is your favorite animal at the zoo? The monkeys, because they laugh and stuff and hang around.
Today, that little girl would be 30 years old.
I was her age. She would be my age now. She would be pursuing her own career. She never got to grow up. She is frozen in time now.
Well, the police were convinced pretty early on that Patsy and or John were involved. And you had a district attorney's office that was saying, not fast. And that created enormous tension between the two.
Did you hear anything yesterday? I think there are some new developments.
Alex Hunter, the district attorney, wanted someone to come in with fresh eyes in this case and look at it from the perspective of a defense attorney. Who might have killed John Benet as an intruder, not just the parents, but from the outside?
Boulder DA Alex Hunter brought Lou Smith out of retirement to help solve the Ramsey case.
One of the great challenges is to try to do the case right. And, I think we're making efforts to meet that challenge by involving people like Lou Smith.
The legendary investigator Lou Smith. He had a history of closing cases.
He had such tenacity. He was a bulldog. Once he got something in his mind, once he got the reins in his teeth, he was not letting go.
Lou Smith was my father. He was just known as, the detective that solved cases. When he got to a murder scene, he spent time dictating everything he saw. Where the sun was in the sky, what the weather conditions were like, what the neighboring houses looked like.
My grandfather was a detective on one of the biggest unsolved murders in our generation. Prior to this case, Lou Smith had investigated over 200 homicide cases that led to arrests and convictions. Lou dedicated a big part of his life to finding John Benet's murderer.
When he started his investigation, he felt like everybody else did, that it was probably one of the two parents.
His
parents were probably involved in it. I thought this would be a fairly easy case. I thought it would be a slam dunk. And I remember talking to my daughter. I kind of joked with her, saying that, if somebody did get in the house, it must have been Santa Claus coming down the chimney.
It was within a couple of days after my dad started on the investigation, when he had a chance to review pictures, the evidence, that he was already saying, I think that they need to look the other way. He was already noting in his journal that he felt that they needed to look at an intruder.
Lou came up with the intruder theory. You can't think about that theory without associating it with Lou Smith.
The first thing that stood out to him was an open window in the basement. There was a suitcase propped up against it.
He didn't buy the Boulder Police Department's conclusion that no one could get in that basement window. He began to say maybe somebody did get into that house.
I'll show you how easily it can be done.
So what did Lou Smith do? He went and climbed in the window himself with a camera rolling to prove that it could be done.
It really wasn't that difficult coming in that window.
Maybe. But the other important point is, how soon was this guy's footprint?
Some argue the footprint could have been inadvertently left by...
know that things are usually what they seem. Don't make it complicated.
There's no reason at all for the Ramseys to use a stun gun. And the Ramseys don't have a stun gun. If it's not a stun gun, what is it? That's the question I always ask. You tell me what it is.
So everybody sort of poo-pooed and ridiculed the intruder theory until Lou Smith started to stand up and point out things that everybody else, from the Boulder PD to the general public at large, had overlooked or dismissed. He said, wait a second, we need to look at this again. It actually is possible. It actually is plausible. And in his view of it, it's actually the most likely thing that happened.
The police and the district attorney are at odds. The DA is looking at the intruder theory, the police focused on the parents, but both want to get the Ramseys to come in for a formal videotaped interrogation.
Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it.
Lou Smith thought that the Ramseys were being targeted unfairly.
Thought there was something drastically wrong. I had seen evidence of an intruder.
Family. That was not something that was made public for quite a long time.
They knew at the time that there was DNA in her panties. That it was mixed foreign DNA, and that it was not from Ramsey's DNA. Not Patsy's, not John's, and not Burke's.
Detective Lou Smith was like, whoa, while you're pouring water all over the intruder theory, you're not revealing that you have found unidentified DNA and it doesn't match anybody in the Ramsey family.
Lou is just incensed that the focus is still being, well, it could be Patsy, maybe we need to get her to confess.
The Ramseys had been interrogated by police 4 months after John Bonet's death. But now authorities want the Ramseys to come in again for a formal videotaped interrogation.
There were months and months of negotiations. Things about whether they could be videotaped. What are the questions going to be? Should the Boulder police be a part of it? Because the Ramseys said, we don't trust the police. We don't want them there.
Ultimately, the interrogation took place at a different police department.
And at the end, the Boulder police had to watch from another building.
The Ramseys finally sit down with the police for a videotaped interrogation in June 1998, a year and a half after John Bonet's murder.
Today is Wednesday, June 24th, 1998. Preston, Brookfield Police Department. Tricia Ramsey.
Tom Haney, who was one of the most respected homicide detectives out of Denver, was chosen to interview Patsy Ramsey.
Patsy Ramsey had a year and a half to prepare. I knew that it was going to be tough to get a spontaneous response.
Do you ever recall purchasing black duct tape like this? It seems like there can't be a house in the world that doesn't have duct tape because it repairs everything.
Well, I never liked it because it's so gooey. Isn't it gooey?
He started out softly and kindly and curious, and then he got pointed with his questions, and that made Patsy angry.
If I told you right now that we have, in the process of being examined, trace evidence that appears to link you to the death of John Bonet, what would you tell me?
That's totally totally test.
How is it possible?
I did not kill my child. I didn't have anything to do with it.
She said it was impossible that we had physical evidence linking her to that crime.
I'm talking about scientific evidence.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it. John Ramsey didn't do it, and we didn't have a clue of anybody who did do it.
I am so taken with her swagger. She just tells them, you know, you think you have some evidence on me? Well, you better look again.
We love that child, okay? We're not involved. Read my lips. Let's find out who is.
She's very feisty. She's very combative. And that doesn't mean she's guilty, but it doesn't mean she's innocent either.
My life has been hell from that day forward. And I can't stand the thought of thinking somebody's out here walking on the street. God knows we might do it again to another child. You know, quit screwing around asking me about things that are ridiculous. Let's find the person that did this.
Lou Smith was assigned to interrogate John Ramsey.
When Lou interviewed someone, he pried anything out of people just by being understanding and really listening.
Now, John, and I know this is touching right back on very relevant spot. Was this tape wrapped around anywhere, or was it stuck down? It was very firm across her lips.
I thought John was much more measured and composed. You don't see the drama. I see a lot of pain in that man.
He reached out, flipped the latch, opened the door immediately like that. Okay, did you say immediately? There was a white blanket. I just knew it found her.
I think those tapes were so intriguing to watch, but the bottom line is there's nothing there that they could use to say, aha, we've got you.
Both John and Patsy deny in the interrogations that anyone in their family killed John Bonet.
We want to do what we can to help solve this case for you.
My dad's conclusions after that interview were just firmed up his belief that the Ramseys had nothing to do with this murder.
I'm not saying parents don't kill their kid. Parents do kill their children. So, what they're trying to say, Patsy, is their actions before, during, and after are all consistent with innocent. They didn't do it.
My dad started getting frustrated as time went on because he felt that the case against the Ramseys was being slanted where no other evidence was coming in.
I thought there was something drastically wrong, and that there was a gross injustice in this case. I had seen evidence of an intruder in the house that night.
Lou Smith thought that the Ramseys were being targeted unfairly, and he didn't believe the police were listening to him.
Smith so strongly disagrees with the prosecutor's focus on Ramseys that he is resigning from the case, saying, "The case tells me John and Patsy Ramsey did not kill their daughter."
He wrote a letter to Alex Hunter telling them that he couldn't be a part of the persecution of these people, is how he termed it.
He wrote, "I intend to stand with this family and somehow help them through this and find the killer of their daughter."
My dad may have resigned from the district attorney's office, but he never stopped work on the case. He walked in John Bonet's shoes, and he owed it to her, he felt, to continue his investigation.
One thing Lou Smith fought to do was tell a grand jury his side of the story, the intruder theory.
Grand jurors arrived at the Boulder County Justice Center this morning and were escorted into the courthouse by sheriff's deputies.
I think Alex Hunter got shamed into calling a grand jury. I mean, he didn't do it until September 1998, almost 2 years later. And I think the media pressure and the pressure from the police department forced him to do it.
Good morning, Counsel.
And remember, this is after O.J. Simpson, where most people think the evidence of Simpson's guilt was insurmountable.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
And yet, he walked. Alex remembered that. He told me one time, "I don't want to spend 2 years of my life and $5 million of the taxpayers' money
and lose in court.
Alex Hunter sat a grand jury for 13 months.
Are you surprised by anything you've seen?
No. Over 13 months, those people heard over 100 witnesses.
My name is Jonathan Webb. I was a grand juror on the JonBenet Ramsey case. It bothers me that the murder of a little girl like this has gone on unsolved for essentially a quarter century.
Members of the Boulder grand jury looked very much like detectives themselves as they finally toured the Ramsey house.
From a crime scene perspective, it was very disturbing how she was found. She's on a concrete floor, a garrote around her neck, and she's 6 years old. That's pretty horrible.
Webb told us that the grand jury spent most of their time focused on two main issues. First, who wrote that ransom note?
We heard from 3 handwriting experts, and even though the handwriting experts couldn't definitively say that she wrote it, they all 3 came to the same conclusion that it could have been Patsy Ramsey.
The Ramsey defense team had their own experts who said that the comparison between the writing on the ransom note and Patsy's handwriting was not conclusive. We asked an expert to weigh in on the case.
My name is Jennifer Nasso. I am a forensic document examiner. Handwriting is a great piece of evidence to have because you can identify the writer of a piece of writing. Throughout the ransom note, there's potential that the author attempted to disguise their writing. It doesn't look smooth and fluid. It's very, very shaky. So it looks like someone was purposely trying to shake their hand to alter the way that the writing looks. This is an example from the ransom note, where you see that kind of typewritten formation of the letter A. This is also from the ransom note, where you see that regular printed A. There are similarities between the ransom note and Patsy Ramsey's writing. However, the similarities that are seen are very general in nature. They're characteristics that many people execute within their writing. So here is another example. This formation seen in the ransom note is 2 strokes, where there's the stroke downward, the pen is lifted up, and then the bowl is created. Right here, again, from the ransom note, where it starts the formation of the bowl and terminates upward. So down here are examples of Patsy Ramsey's known writing. And you do see some of those formations again. That is significant that you see each of the formations represented, but keep in mind this is one letter from the whole ransom note. Is it possible that Patsy Ramsey wrote the ransom note? Yes. Is it possible someone else wrote the ransom note? Yes.
And the grand jury believed that she wrote it.
The second focus for this grand jury, according to Jonathan Webb, was the viability of the intruder theory.
Smith actually presented his intruder theory to the grand jury.
This is the very first photo taken of the train room basement window. The window is wide open. Now, if I was a detective, I'd have said, wow, this is interesting.
But the grand jury wasn't buying the intruder theory because of those cobwebs in the window.
The intruder theory didn't make sense to the grand jury.
There is probable cause to charge the suspects with a crime.
We were troubled by to what level of confidence do we need to have to vote to indict? And it's the preponderance of the evidence, which means greater than 50%. And soon after that, we voted to indict.
Both Patsy and John are accused of permitting a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation which posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in the death of JonBenet Ramsey. And then in the other one, did unlawfully, knowingly, and feloniously render assistance to a person with intent to hinder the apprehension of the person. These two things together make it clear that the grand jury couldn't point the finger at one or the other, but that they were convinced that it was one of the two of them, and that the other one helped.
This is 7 News at 5.
There is high anticipation in Boulder right now for a Ramsey decision, and we are about to hear an announcement from Boulder DA Alex Hunter.
I and my prosecution task force believe we do not have sufficient evidence to warrant the filing of charges against anyone who has been investigated at this time.
I was shocked. It's extremely unusual for a grand jury to vote to charge and the DA not charge.
And you think it was the right decision?
I think it was the right decision. I think no matter what you think about the case, I think that they would never have gotten the conviction.
Thank you very much.
We've done all this work to try and vet the Ramseys. What work have we done to truly vet other potential suspects in this case?
That's why Lou Smith continued investigating even after he resigned from the case.
Lou Smith calls me cold, and I said to him, I've been praying for somebody to call and want to listen. Well, I believe a friend of mine killed her.
But I think what turned this whole case has always been DNA. The killer left behind, I believe, part of his DNA.
Over nearly 13 years, Lou took all of the information that he had on this case.
In theory, that could be scraped, and they could match that up to my DNA.
In 2008, the then district attorney for Boulder, Mary Lacey, decided to do a new round.
Now, this new touch DNA uncovered DNA from at least one unknown male
in 3 places on JonBenét's body that doesn't match anybody.
Basically, not going to look at the family any longer.
Here at the district attorney's office with this incredible letter to JonBenét's father.
DA Mary Lacey wrote John Ramsey, "We do not consider your immediate family, including you, your wife Patsy, and your son Burke, to be under any suspicion in the commission of this crime."
John Ramsey appeared on a local newscast.
We're certainly grateful for an acknowledgement that we are innocent, that this was an intruder, which of course we've always maintained.
Somewhere, somehow, there may be a match to that DNA. Then you got your killer.
Our killer, JonBené, how many victims has he had in the past? And how many victims is he going to have in the future? And so this killer could still be murdering even today.
Lou Smith spent years organizing and investigating the evidence in the JonBené Ramsey murder case. But eventually he ran out of time. When he got sick with cancer, he knew that his time was limited. And so during that time, he just talked to others about not letting this case die.
He had people coming every single day, 60 to 70, 80 people a day, coming to see him. And they said their goodbyes. And during that time, he would still talk about the case.
I remember about the last 3 days he had slipped into a coma, and the conversations would become one way, and I don't know if you could hear me or not.
It's very much an honor to be here to celebrate Lou Smith's life and to share my thoughts with you. I'm John Ramsey. I had the opportunity to visit Lou a week before he died. Remarkably, during that time together, Lou talked a lot about the case. He hadn't given up. He never gave up.
When Lou Smith died, he passed the torch of the JonBené Ramsey investigation onto his daughter, Cindy Mara, and she took it.
And he just said, I have a name. I want you to write it down. And I did. And he said, that's where you start.
You know, we'd be glad to pay that. We don't have that electronic report, so we would need Boulder to send it.
After my dad died, a couple of us, our family, and then some of his old homicide partners, we just formed a team.
You want to go down to number 2, because that is an in-state one.
Yep.
What we all share in common is that commitment to fulfill Lou's dying wish, that this case doesn't die with him. And I think it's that devotion, that respect, that love for Lou is what keeps our team moving forward.
There were a whole host of other possible suspects.
This is Bill McReynolds, the local Santa in town.
There's no way in the world that I could be involved in the death of my daughter.
What a perfect suspect. Santa Claus. Wouldn't that have just tied it all up in a nice little bow?
Grandpa stated that if you can't show me a motive, show me evidence of bad character. If you can't show me evidence of bad character...
He had condensed everything he knew about every person of interest into a spreadsheet.
The team that his family created is confident that the killer's name is on that spreadsheet.
So what do we know about the person suspected of killing JonBené Ramsey? The DA says the genetic profile from the DNA belongs to a male.
There were a whole host of other possible suspects, ranging from known criminals to friends of the Ramseys.
Brad, investigators looked beyond the Ramsey family. In fact, there was some speculation into potential involvement by 2
Gary Oliva.
He was a homeless man who hung out at a church just a block and a half from the Ramseys' home. And he confessed that he killed JonBenet Ramsey. In fact, he called a friend right after she was killed, crying, sobbing, saying he'd just killed a little girl.
They took a look at him, but eventually eliminated him because there's absolutely no connection between he and the Ramseys. And his DNA, they used that to eliminate him. This is Bill McReynolds, the local Santa in town.
I was the Santa Claus for 3 years at their party, and I always liked the Ramsey party. So I called Patsy in particular and said it's time for our party.
And apparently JonBenet had made a comment that he, Bill McReynolds, was coming to their house to see JonBenet. I think everybody thought that was a little weird. His list.
Michael Helgoth was an interesting character.
Lou Schmidt calls me cold, and I said to him, I've been praying for somebody to call and want to listen. Mike said he wanted to kill himself to get it over with, and that's one thing. And then he said that him and a partner were going to make $50,000 or $60,000 at Christmas. He wanted to crack a human skull.
Michael Helgoth. Soon there will be no one on the list but you.
He made quite the headline.
I love JonBenet. Die accidentally. No.
Everyone probably around the world knows John Mark Carr.
Her death was an accident. Yes.
Problem is, he wasn't in Boulder, Colorado. Well, that's a big question.
We went through the people of interest, the suspects, and came up with our top 20.
Take a look at it and run it through their program.
What our team has been doing is focusing on collecting DNA and testing DNA.
Do you want to get in touch with them once to...
I think we should make the effort.
You want to just start like maybe in September?
And since Lou has passed away, the team has been able to clear a number of people from that list. However, the work is pretty slow because of the time and expense involved in locating somebody on that sheet and obtaining their DNA and then testing it.
We have asked suspects for their DNA, and in other cases, we've, I guess, done it the old-fashioned way, with surveillance and trickery.
We've gotten together and followed people and gotten a discarded cup or some such thing.
So the DNA is evolving constantly, and so we're in better position today than we've ever been to solve the JonBenet Ramsey case.
We are just trying to eliminate people from that list, and we just figure if we keep at it, hopefully we'll finally whittle it down to one person remaining on that list.
Lou Smith's family believes that all but one person on that list is innocent.
Ramsey. Will the case ever be prosecuted?
Is it still just as mysterious?
They get in. Why'd they target her?
And to some degree, that makes it even more fascinating.
There was a person seen going across the lawn of the Ramsey house. The night of the murder was her killer trying to get into the house.
In September, we met with the Boulder DA's office and PD.
And what we presented was a confidential list of our top 20 people of interest and the list of the 8 people of interest that our team had eliminated through DNA analysis.
We just don't feel at this point that they are actively investigating this case.
The Boulder Police Department says the Ramsey case is an active, ongoing investigation, but they have never publicly commented on the handling of the case.
This team is...
When we end up being too old to do it, but we're not going to stop investigating. We're just not going to do it.
This case boils down to the intruder, the Ramsey. And if the Ramseys didn't do it, then it's an intruder. And if it's an intruder, the intruder's still out there.
The case took its toll on the whole Ramsey family emotionally and financially over the years. John Ramsey would lose his job and spend millions on private investigators, lawyers, and security.
There are still people today, John, 22 years later, who believe you or Patsy or Burke had something to do with the murder of John Benet.
I know that, and how could they believe otherwise? Because that's what they were told. You know, even if we have a conviction, confession, and this person's in prison, there's going to be 5-10% of the population that still thinks we're guilty.
My dad certainly suffered a tremendous amount, but I think he's focused on life today and enjoying life with his family and grandkids, and he's remarried. Patsy died from cancer in 2006. She's buried in Marietta, Georgia, next to JonBenet.
In my mind, she's still my 6-year-old little girl. That's how I remember her. Every once in a while, I'll see a little child from behind, a little blonde-headed ponytail girl, about 6 years old, and that catches me for a second because it looks like JonBenet.
The family has not lost the will to fight and the will to find the killer. We work on this daily. There's a group of dedicated volunteers that work on this daily. I want the trauma to stop for the family. And if we can find the killer, then the next generation doesn't have to live with that trauma and the unknown and the speculation. The only way to do that is to find out who did it. I think it's really important for people to understand that this case can be solved. There's a narrative out there that this is an unsolved homicide, and we just have to accept that as fact. And that is
Marinette County, Wisconsin, 1976. In an area thought to be safe for campers, a loving couple meets a cruel end.
David was deceased outside of a rustic campground toilet.
He had been shot once in the neck, but once was all it took. This was a fatal shot with a lot of blood.
400 yards away, in ferns and bushes and brush in the woods, they found the female victim.
She too had been killed by 2 shots, but not until after she had been raped.
What could drive a person to commit such a monstrous act?
This was sexually motivated. He wanted to sexually assault Ellen, but he had to get rid of David to do that.
Campers report sightings of a mysterious individual lurking in the park.
They saw an individual walking out of the woods carrying a rifle.
2 people killed. The woman is brutally raped. The people in the community would be afraid and shocked and dismayed that it would happen here.
Police follow all leads, but the case turns cold.
They worked on it very, very hard for several years and followed several leads, and nothing seemed to pan out.
Police just ran out of options, ran out of possibilities, and nothing further could be done.
It seems the killer got away with it. That is, until new forensic science becomes available. Criminals who have hidden in the shadows for years find there's no escaping science and their own family DNA. Welcome to Bloodline Detectives. McClintock County Park, a scenic natural park located in Marinette County, Wisconsin. In 1976, it's a popular spot for camping and outdoor activities.
Marinette County is a very rural area in northeastern Wisconsin. A large portion of it is wooded. It has a large county national forest.
McClintock County Park has a small campground on the south part of it, and north part of it there's another parking area. There's some hiking trails there.
It's a very, very secluded park. It's kind of a big circular driveway that has little offshoots that are campsites. It's maybe a 1-acre park. It borders a little creek.
But in this seemingly serene park, a shocking discovery is about to be made.
On July 9th, 1976, a park caretaker was Stanley. He went into the camp area, and when he got to the restroom, which is basically like an outhouse, he saw a body.
It's not the type of thing anybody would normally find or see, and I would assume that he was terrified and kind of shaken and didn't really know what to do.
He went up to the mail and couldn't get a response, and so there was no telephone in McClintock Park at that time. And right after he made this discovery, there was another man, Lance Temper. He and his girlfriend were happened to drive through the McClintock Park camping area, and Stanley flagged him down and said, "Hey, there's this man over here that's not responsive." Lance Temper was actually an off-duty Marinette police officer. And so Lance Temper went over and discovered that the male was deceased. And so Stanley, after hearing that, drove up to Goodman Park, which had a telephone, and that's about a 10-minute drive.
After rushing to Goodman Park, Stanley comes across the payphone.
And so then Stanley went up and called Marinette County Dispatch and was received at like 2:53 p.m. The first patrol officer was Deputy Giroux, and so he went there and, yes, helped to secure the scene basically with tape, indicating that it was a police scene and then people could not enter without authorization.
They knew enough that this was probably going to be a big enough scene that they needed to contact the State Division of Justice. So basically they had just secured the scene that night as it was getting close to dark when most help was able to arrive, and waited until the crime lab and Department of Justice arrived in the morning.
When they arrived and they saw the body of the male by the women's restroom there, they looked around. Basically what he was wearing was a t-shirt, some shorts. He had a camera that had been around his neck. He had a hat that was not on his head anymore, but was on the ground next to him.
Items of clothing that may be damp or whatever, you want to make sure that you put those in paper bags and preserve them, not in plastic bags. If you put them in plastic bags, the evidence will deteriorate quickly. The sheriff's office did an excellent job of preserving the crime scene and immediately requesting a field response unit from the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory, rather than trying to pick up things on their own that they may or may not have handled appropriately.
They also found a wallet as well, and that was significant because if it had been a robbery, then they would have expected that valuables would have been taken, and that was not the case.
They found a billfold that had his identification in it, and they got his name off of that.
The male victim was identified as David Schultes.
After identifying the homicide victim, detectives search the area for more evidence. They discover a nearby tent where further horror awaits them.
When the officers went and viewed the tent, they were able to determine that there was probably a female who was with him, but not, of course, located at the scene at that time.
Now, Lance Temper had gone to the campsite. There was a car, an AMC Gremlin, and had looked inside the car, and he noted a female's purse inside the car, but at that point, they did not locate the female.
It was shortly after they began the search that they did locate the body of Ellen Matthews. They located her about 150 yards away from David, and he was in a wooded area, and she was partially clothed.
There was a short-sleeve summer weight sweater that was partially over her head. It appeared to investigators that she was possibly had been stripped because the undergarments were gone, but the shorts were partially on.
They did locate her underwear about 10 to 15 feet away from the body.
In Wisconsin, the coroner is called to the scene of any unexpected death and any violent death. The coroner makes the pronouncement of death. The bodies would have been transported to Madison.
The autopsy, they're looking for the cause and manner of death.
It was determined that David Schultes died pretty much immediately with a gunshot wound to the neck. Ellen Matthews, it was determined that she had died from 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest, one to the upper abdomen.
She likely was shot in the abdomen first. That would not have killed her. It would have dropped her to the ground. The shot that likely would have killed her would have been the shot to the right breast, going out the breast, because it transected the aorta and the heart.
Because of some of the scrapes and scratches and cuts and the semen found in her shorts, they pretty much determined that there was a sexual assault that occurred. By all accounts from the parents and from her friends and family, she would not have fought back. She was one that was not into confrontation. She was very meek, mild-mannered. At one point, she had even had a conversation with her mother about if something would ever have happened like that, would she fight back? And she replied no, she would just let it happen and pray to God that she lived to get through it.
Marinette County detectives attend the funerals of both victims on the off chance they notice attendees acting suspiciously.
They went to the young couple's funeral and were vigilant for people who were not members of the family, were not friends, who were hanging out there for what reason? Because sometimes killers do get a kick out of seeing how people react to their crimes, the mourning, the grief that people are suffering. Some of them, shall we say, get off on it.
It's just one more step that police departments and sheriff's offices can take to try and develop information when none exists. It's got to be extremely devastating. I simply can't imagine going through that. I have a young daughter who enjoys camping and goes camping by herself. And every time she does that, I worry about it because of my memory of this case.
The people in the community would be afraid and shocked and dismayed that it would happen here. 2 people killed, the woman is brutally raped, and we don't know who the person is.
Investigators are now on the hunt for suspects in this double homicide, but will their leads be strong enough to catch this cold-blooded killer? In McClintock County Park, Marinette County, Wisconsin, a young couple are brutally murdered on July the 9th, 1976, in the popular camping ground. The victims are identified as a soon-to-be married couple, 25-year-old David Schuldes and 24-year-old Ellen Matthews. Schuldes had been shot in the neck, and tragically, Matthews had been sexually assaulted before being fatally shot by the killer.
David was a 25-year-old male. He was attending the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay and worked at the Green Bay newspaper. Ellen, she had graduated from the University of Wisconsin Green Bay and worked in the library there. They were a happy young couple and they were engaged.
They had no enemies, and they just enjoyed getting out in nature and spending time together.
They like to camp, and they like to get away and do things. Appeared by all accounts to just be a young couple in love, planning to be married later that year, and they were excited about that.
In '76, it was pretty rare to see any kind of homicides or violent crimes being committed in Marinette or Marin County.
It just always stood out to me as like, how could something like this happen there?
In fact, to this day, people don't go to McClintock Park out of fear and because of what had occurred there.
Marinette County detectives appealed to the local community for any information that could lead them to the killer.
They went all over Marinette County to different convenience stores, campgrounds, just any place that people would have frequented, trying to see if anybody saw anyone suspicious or anything suspicious. They did an immense amount of work on the ground to try to develop any type of lead.
People went to Goodman Park a lot more than they did McClintock because of the amenities. There was electricity there was showers and things like that up in that park in the 70s. It was a little more popular with campers to be up there. Our victims attempted to go to that park prior to settling on McClintock Park, but that park was full with campers. One of them being an individual that was camping in Goodman Park at the time. He believed he'd seen them about 1:30 time frame drive through Goodman Park where he was camping. Later that afternoon, a short time later, him and his family went for a ride and went down to McClintock Park. As they were driving through the park, they did notice the same vehicle. So they made note of it again and said, hey, there's that car again. It was a purple-colored Gremlin, and the Gremlin was our victim's car. And they didn't think much of it until, of course, the news broke that there was a double homicide in that park. They arrived approximately 2 p.m. on July 9th, 1976. Set up their camp, put things away. Their tent was very neat and tidy. David did enjoy taking pictures of the wildlife and things like that. So finding him with a camera around his neck, officers at the time believed that they were probably attempting to go for a nature walk and see some of the wildlife in the area. Ellen had to use the bathroom, so she went into one of the outhouses, and when David was waiting outside, somebody from a distance fired a round and shot him through his neck with a high-powered rifle. At that point, Ellen was taken from the bathroom, marched into the wooded area where she was sexually assaulted. After the sexual assault occurred, the suspect allowed her to put her jean shorts back on, and as she was putting her shirt back over her head, when it just got over her head, is when the shots were fired, striking her in the chest and the abdomen, killing her.
A murder like this in such a peaceful, quiet place of such a young couple with so few clues would make people panic, would frighten them into thinking there's someone out there who is killing people, who is still out there doing this, and will he do it again?
As the word got out about the murders in McClintock Park, some information was generated. There was a person that had camped in McClintock Park earlier that week and had said that during the night he heard some noise outside of his camper and was concerned, but he thought it might be a bear. So he had a rifle in his camper and he opened the door of his camper and fired the shot, and he heard some commotion, and that was the end of that. Never any idea if it was a raccoon, a bear, or a person. There were two other people that came forth with information. They were two police officers from Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is about an hour south of Marinette County. He and his wife and another officer and his wife were there camping prior to the murders in McClintock Park. As they were sitting around a campfire in the evening, they said they noticed a person standing off some distance in the woods. They could see the silhouette of an individual standing there. They started to walk toward that individual, and the person disappeared. So they came back, sat around the campfire some more, got to a little bit later in the evening, and noticed a silhouette some distance away in the woods again. That time, instead of going toward the individual, they went to their tent to retrieve their service weapon. When they came back, the individual was gone again. At the time, they thought it was suspicious, but didn't give it a lot of thought until they also learned of the murders in McClintock Park, and at that time, they came forward with that piece of information.
While examining the vicinity of the crime scene, investigators locate a vital piece of evidence.
Investigators recovered a bullet fragment, a jacket from a fence that was outside of the outhouse. That bullet had gone through David's throat, and that one had grooves and striations on it that the crime lab was able to tell our investigators that if you locate gun, we could possibly ID it. So a lot of effort went into looking for a .30 caliber rifle, which is what they determined caused the homicide.
Unfortunately, .30 caliber weapons are extremely common in northern Wisconsin. It's a very common hunting weapon. So in the course of the investigation, we collected a number of weapons, .30 caliber weapons, and submitted them to the crime laboratory, none of which, of course, matched the bullets that were recovered at the scene.
The day after these homicides occurred, two young men indicated to their parents that they might have seen the suspect in the case. McClintock Park has a sister park that is actually a walking park. It's about a half a mile north of the campgrounds. And they had stopped there at the time, and they were walking around down by the river when they heard a gunshot.
Sounded like a rifle shot. These were young men that were experienced hunters and grew up around that, so they knew what a rifle shot sounded like.
Those two got back in the vehicle, and then they traveled out to the main road, and they drove south towards McClintock Park Campground. As they were driving, they look off to the right, and they see an individual who they described as about 28 to 30 years old, dressed in a military-style jacket, wearing boots, and carrying what they thought was like a .30 caliber rifle. And he was walking through the woods at a pretty good pace. They assumed he was about 15 to 20 feet away from them when they drove by.
Unusual, but not unheard of. People do hunt out of season. That's called poaching. That does happen here. And so that's kind of what they thought was happening. Somebody was hunting out of season.
And didn't give it a whole lot more thought until they heard about the homicide investigation.
So they briefly caught a glimpse of this man and described that man to law enforcement as best they could. Law enforcement engaged the services of a composite artist, and they developed a pretty rudimentary sketch of this person that they saw. There was also on the other side of the road from where this man had been spotted, the other side of Parkway Road, a Plymouth vehicle, and one of the young men was able to give a partial license plate. It appeared to be like a Michigan license plate.
Well, obviously, one of the first things that we did was contact the Michigan State Police and got a printout of any license plate that could possibly come up with that combination.
So law enforcement went off what they had, which was this person walking with the .30 caliber rifle and the description and the composite, as well as looking for this vehicle. They went and scoured all of the surrounding campgrounds or
convenience stores, any place that may have information where somebody may have driven through. And so then asked people if they had seen a vehicle similar to the one found across the road, if they had seen anyone matching that description or seen anything suspicious at Wool, or if they had seen Ellen and David. Unfortunately, the leads really weren't significant at that time. The main thing they were focusing on, again, was the composite sketch. That's really the only thing that they had that was solid at the time.
I put together the sightings by the 2 Green Bay police officers and the murders in McClintock Park. Well, I was convinced that it was somebody who was either from the area or had been in the area or at the very least was very comfortable in the woods. And unfortunately, the 2/3 of northern Wisconsin is a wooded area, and there are lots of people that are comfortable in the woods.
Investigators are unable to identify the mysterious man in the woods. Weeks turn into months without new leads. Despite their best efforts, Marinette County investigators are losing momentum.
In the later 70s, it really dropped off, not due to lack of effort or lack of wanting to solve the crime. They had gone through all the investigative leads that they could, and it didn't lead them anywhere to a resolution.
It was a cold case because of how old it was getting, but it certainly was one that if somebody wanted to say something, if something came our way, it was investigated. So it never really was inactive, but we all had our moments of doubt. Are we ever going to be able to solve this?
The case may be cold, but Marinette detectives do not give up hope of solving this harrowing double homicide. As the years pass, advancements in forensic technology offer newfound hope. Can the killer's DNA unlock the key to this mystery? Marinette County, Wisconsin. On July the 9th, 1976, 25-year-old David Schultes and his girlfriend, 24-year-old Ellen Matthews, are discovered murdered in McClintock County Park. Both victims tragically died from gunshot wounds, and even more disturbing, Ellen was sexually assaulted prior to her death. The double homicide investigation is underway, but new leads are scarce.
Back in 1976, technology was a little bit different than it is now, and they relied heavily on fingerprints and serology and blood typing. The serology is like the analysis of fluids, and then blood typing, if they have blood available, they can do a type of A, B, O, or whatever. And in some fluids, like semen, some men are excretors, and you can determine their blood type because they are excretors.
Typically, the best result comes from a blood sample. However, we also can get very pristine DNA samples from semen.
Using the biological samples taken from Ellen's clothing, investigators identify the blood type of the killer.
What we had was the fact that the person was a type O blood and was a secretor, and unfortunately type O positive is the most common blood type, and so that didn't help us much as far as identifying anyone. It was extremely important that evidence be collected properly. It was extremely critical that our state crime laboratory preserve that evidence, and as long as it was preserved, it was able, as technology improved, to eventually develop a DNA profile.
Despite this solid lead, the case once again turns cold. Then, in the mid-90s, a new generation of detectives pull the infamous case off the shelf.
Detective Sergeant Craig Bates, he was tasked with investigating the old homicide cases that were not resolved in Marinette County, and one of them was in the McClintock County Park homicides. The early 90s was kind of the start of using DNA in police work.
Detective Bates learns about advancements in DNA profiling and considers whether an updated analysis of the biological sample can lead to a suspect.
And he took some of the evidence from the case and sent it to a couple of different labs throughout the country that did DNA analysis, and they were able to develop a DNA profile from the semen that was in the shorts. That profile was entered into the CODIS, which is Combined DNA Identification System. It's a computerized database for known offenders and for unknown suspects, and they kind of compare them on a regular basis. So if you have an unknown suspect profile, you import that into the DNA database, and if it matches, you'll get a notification that there's a match.
The results were negative. We weren't able to connect our suspect's DNA with any other suspects in the United States or any other crimes in the United States. Either the suspect committed another homicide and was in prison and never did have to give his DNA, or the suspect was dead, or maybe on the off end that somebody who did something this heinous maybe just didn't do it again and never was caught. So ultimately we knew our suspect in the case had never had to submit any kind of DNA to the state.
Despite being unable to locate a match to the suspect profile in the CODIS database, investigators make progress in 2018 thanks to a DNA technology company based in Virginia.
Parabon is a genetic technology company. So they do a number of things, and those include snapshot phenotyping, where they can predict someone's physical traits based on their DNA. So hair color, eye color, shape, face, skin color. If they are contracted to do so from law enforcement, they can create an image that is an approximation of what someone would look like, just based on their DNA. So it's not meant to be a photographic image of somebody. However, it should be consistent with that person's traits.
Detective Baldwin came in to see me and said, "We need to talk about this. We want your take on this. This is something we should pursue in this case because we have this profile." When I started watching what Parabon Nanolabs was doing and C.C. Moore's work and her associates at work, I almost came off of my chair. I remember thinking, my goodness, yes, we have to do that.
We primarily work cases where there's an unidentified violent criminal, a rapist or a murderer. Many of these cases are very old. They've been cold cases for years or decades. We also work some more active cases. So what we are trying to do is help law enforcement identify the person responsible for a violent crime. And if it's a more active case, we might even be able to help them stop that criminal in their tracks.
Then we coordinated with the crime lab and them to provide the DNA sample to them so they could do their work on it.
And Parabon did do a phenotype sketch of the suspect based on the DNA found in Ellen Matthews' shorts.
They told us that it was a male primarily of Northern European descent, fair-complected, either like reddish or light brown hair, blue eyes, and probably had some freckling. It was like 40 years after the event, so if he was 25 at the time, 65 would have been his approximate age, we thought, when we conducted the sketch through Parabon. After we did get that sketch, we had a press conference and put that out to the TV stations.
To the newspapers and to the public, asking if there were any new leads or information that could be generated based on the suspect, having these particular physical characteristics.
And we developed probably about 70 leads from various people. We started to track down these people and, talk to them. Hey, what do you know about this case? Were you willing to consent to give us DNA to compare in the case?
And we were able to go out and swab each one of those individuals. None of the 70, of course, ever hit on the DNA profile that the suspect had.
The suspect is yet to be found, but investigators continue in progressing the case. They team up with Parabon Nanolabs once again to try a revolutionary forensic technique that is cracking the coldest of cold cases across the country.
So when Parabon told us about the sketch and the genetics of the person, they said another service they do is this investigative genetic genealogy, and they told us that based on the person's DNA, they could compare DNA to people that are in other databanks and try to match DNA and build family trees from that.
I'm one of the early pioneers of using autosomal DNA to help people learn more about their family tree and their genetic heritage. Autosomal DNA is the type of DNA you inherit from all of your great-grandparents back to your third and fourth great-grandparents. So you inherit 50% from your mother and your father, everyone does, about 25% from each of your grandparents, and about 12.5% from each great-grandparent. And so it can inform us about all the different branches of your family tree. And it became apparent very early on in my work that this incredibly powerful tool for human identification was applicable to law enforcement cases, both unidentified human remains and identifying unknown violent criminals.
On December the 21st, 2018, Parabon nanolabs provide Marinette County investigators with a strong lead. The genealogists have generated a pool of suspects using the killer's DNA. They suspect he belongs to the Van Evenhoven family from the Green Bay area, Wisconsin.
They had a number of children, including 4 sons. They looked at the Van Evenhoven sons in the beginning of 2019.
Todd Baldwin was the primary lead investigator in this case, and the first of the brothers that they focused on was the closest in age to what we thought the person was, and they wound up doing a garbage or a trash pick at his house.
As soon as he put the garbage out, me and another detective went, obtained the garbage.
And they went through it and they developed things out of the garbage that they thought would contain DNA.
One of them being an inhaler.
The DNA collected from that garbage pull, it was in the right family, according to the crime lab, but not the right person. Investigators progressed down to another brother who lived up in Florence County. An investigator named Tom Shallow has a cabin just down the road from this other brother. And he said, yeah, he comes over for coffee all the time. So one day, the brother came over for coffee. Tom picked the coffee cup up and sent that in as well. And that was the same thing. Same family, wrong brother. That narrowed us down to 2 brothers. One was deceased, and then we had Ray, who was still alive.
Detectives waste no time tracking down Raymond Van Evenhoven to get a DNA sample from him. Are investigators finally about to corner this elusive killer? Marinette County, Wisconsin, 2019. Detectives are investigating the 1976 murder of 25-year-old David Schuldes and 24-year-old Ellen Matthews, who were shot in McClintock Park. Tragically, Ellen was also sexually assaulted prior to her death. Now, over 40 years later, Parabon Nanolabs, utilizing investigative genetic genealogy, have narrowed the suspect list down to 4 brothers. Detectives run further DNA tests, which rules out 3 brothers, leaving just one, Raymond Van Evenhoven.
Raymond lived in a real remote area on a dead-end road. And I surveilled him for approximately a month, was unable to ever obtain any kind of DNA left behind from him. And he also didn't have a garbage pickup where he was located. You had to take your garbage to the dump. So it was going to be hard to obtain garbage from him. So I asked an individual I used to work with quite often if he could do something for me and try to obtain Raymond Van Evenhoven's DNA.
The current chief deputy of Oconto County and Detective Baldwin developed a plan to conduct a survey with Ray, because Ray kind of lived in the middle of nowhere, and it was hard to actually do surveillance and follow him around and try to get a discarded cigarette butt or something like that.
They knocked on his door and said, hey, we're doing a survey of what you think of policing in this particular township. Gave him the survey. Raymond filled out the survey, put it in the envelope, and licked the envelope to seal it.
Raymond's saliva sample is compared to the DNA left at the crime scene over 40 years ago. It is a match.
We were very excited because we finally had narrowed down on a suspect, and now it was just a matter of putting the rest of the pieces of the puzzle together as best as we could. We developed a plan to go arrest Ray and conduct a search warrant of his residence at the same time, and we went there, and Detective Baldwin and I went in first while the rest of the crew staged to conduct the search warrant. And we met Ray at his house. He invited us inside. We explained, hey, we're from the Marinette County Sheriff's Department, and you're under arrest for homicide. Ray just kind of put his head down and turned kind of pale and just went along with us. He didn't argue. He didn't ask what this was about. Nothing.
Throughout the investigation, we were under the impression that the suspect was going to be probably in his 60s or so. I never expected that I'd be handcuffing a 82-year-old man for first-degree homicide.
We were hoping we could find the murder weapon or some kind of evidence. Ultimately, we did find a .30 caliber 30-30 rifle in his garage.
found some shell casings. They sent those off to the crime lab, but those were not a match for the bullet fragments that had been found at the crime scene. But again, this was 40-something years after the homicides. Very likely, he just disposed of any shell casings that was used.
He grew up in the rural Green Bay area, the Suamico area. He worked as a metal worker his entire life, and we were told from talking to people that he was either working or he was drinking and drunk and angry.
Raymond was 20 years old in 1950 when he was arrested for attacking a couple of teenage girls, a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old. The 17-year-old was walking with friends when he grabbed her and pulled her into a cemetery. She was screaming and her friends came to her aid. He was already married, but he attacked these two young women. He spent 6 months in prison, and that seemed to be that, although nowadays we would put him on a sex offender registry, which would flag him in a way that didn't happen back in the 1950s and 60s.
Raymond is brought in for questioning over the murders of David Schuldes and Ellen Matthews back in 1976.
And then when Detective Baldwin kind of brought out the pictures of the victims, Ray got kind of angry and really defensive. He didn't show any signs of sympathy for the victims or any remorse for what he'd done.
And claimed to have absolutely no knowledge of the crimes of David and Ellen.
Why did you kill these two people?
Why did you do that?
Well, you killed them, Ray.
You killed them? You meant...
I don't even know.
You might not know them, but you killed them.
Well, I didn't.
Did it ever wake you up at night? Ray, did it ever wake you up at night? This doesn't ever cross your mind, ever. Nope, never. So what you did there doesn't even matter. Don't even care. Remember the blood flying out of her when you shot her, Ray. And then shoot her a second time.
They didn't shoot any goddamn body.
And you shot him. You shot him. You shot him. I did not. You shot him. You did. I did. You did. I did not. You did. No, I did not. Well, then how did your semen get in those shorts, Ray?
I don't know how to get there. What is that?
How would I get your semen?
Well, give me a shit, go right there.
I was looking at how you did. You sexually assaulted her.
No.
That's all I got there.
No.
He was charged with 2 counts of what was then called first-degree murder in the Wisconsin statute. The sexual assault charge we could not go forward with because at that time there was only a 6-year statute of limitations, and that had expired.
Now charged for the murders, Raymond Van Evenhoven is put in custody while awaiting trial.
We were concerned that he was going to have some kind of medical event or medical condition, which was going to, take him away from us before we had a chance to put him on trial. He had a stroke, and he ended up being sent to Murdaugh Mental Health in Madison to be evaluated. Initially, they thought he was probably not competent to stand trial or aid in his defense, and ultimately they decided he was competent.
The trial did not commence until, I believe it was July 19th of 2021. So yes, when you're dealing with someone in their 80s who did have some health issues, certainly that's a concern.
He was wheeled into court, but I thought his demeanor was just cold and didn't care what was going on around him.
Prosecutor Mark Williams gave the opening statement for the state and just basically outlined the evidence that we collected from the crime scene, and particularly the shorts, and how that was collected, how those were preserved, and then the DNA from those shorts from, 45 years earlier, and then ultimately a DNA profile was taken from that. He then talked about the different investigative techniques that the Marinette County Sheriff's Office had used and how we ultimately came to the Van Evenhoven family and to Raymond Van Evenhoven himself, and how the evidence is going to show the inarguable link between Mr. Van Evenhoven and the DNA in Ellen Matthews, and how we were going to put that together to show that only Raymond Van Evenhoven could have killed Ellen and David.
Despite the evidence stacked against him, Raymond's defense tries to maintain his innocence.
They tried to separate the sex and the semen from the homicide, to try to say that there wasn't a link between the two. And then they tried to argue that this male that had been seen by our 2 witnesses when they were driving on Parkway Road, they tried to argue that that was somehow. Raymond had sex with Ellen
the day or two before she goes up with her fiance on a camping trip, and then some other random male kills them. The jury didn't buy that argument.
The jury deliberates for just 2 hours before reaching a verdict. August the 26th, 2021, 84-year-old Raymond van Evenhoven is sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences.
You find out who it was, they're convicted, they're sentenced to prison, and Ray died within a few months of going to prison.
We knew his age, we knew his health, so I didn't expect him to live very long, but kind of wish that he could have hung on as long as he possibly could have so he could at least suffer in prison for the next few years anyways.
The only thing I could say about somebody like that is he had to be a psychopath. He knew what he was doing when he was going through the woods carrying a rifle. David and Ellen just happened to be in the wrong spot. He saw them there and took his weapon and killed them both, knowing full well what he was planning to do and carrying it out in the manner that he did.
This case is a really good illustration of how powerful investigative genetic genealogy is for revealing secrets of all kinds. Your DNA can absolutely tell the story, no matter how old a case is, no matter when or where it happened.
This young couple now would be grandparents themselves. They would be close to celebrating their golden wedding anniversary. And thanks to this technology and thanks to the preservation of evidence, they now lie in their graves side by side with this crime solved.
These young people were killed 24, 25 years old, never had a chance to live their lives.
A tragedy. He went on with his life for that long, and Ellen and David were taken as a mid-20s, a vibrant young couple. Didn't seem fair, didn't seem right. But in the end, justice was done, and we're proud of that.
tuyên bố độc lập, nhưng không phải mọi khó khăn đều đã đi qua. Thực dân Pháp không dễ dàng từ bỏ tham vọng tái chiếm Âu Dương và đất nước lại bước vào một cuộc kháng chiến trường kỳ khác. Trong phần này chúng ta sẽ tìm hiểu về những thách thức mà Việt Nam phải đối mặt sau khi giành được độc lập và vai trò tiếp tục của giai cấp công nhân trong cuộc kháng chiến chống Pháp. Ngay sau khi nước Việt Nam Dân Chủ Cộng Hòa mới được thành lập, tình hình quốc tế và trong nước rất phức tạp. Các cường quốc thế giới sau chiến tranh thế giới thứ hai bắt đầu tái phân chia ảnh hưởng. Thực dân Pháp với tham vọng tái chiếm Âu Dương đã bắt đầu các hoạt động quân sự nhằm tái chiếm lãnh thổ. Trong bối cảnh đó, chính phủ Việt Nam buộc phải ký hiệp định sơ bộ ngày 6 tháng 3 năm 1946 với Pháp để tạm thời duy trì hòa bình, nhưng đây chỉ là bước lùi chiến lược nhằm chuẩn bị cho một cuộc kháng chiến lâu dài. Cuộc kháng chiến chống Pháp chính thức bắt đầu vào ngày 19 tháng 12 năm 1946 khi Chủ tịch Hồ Chí Minh ra lời kêu gọi toàn quốc kháng chiến. Khẩu hiệu thà hy sinh tất cả chứ nhất định không chịu mất nước, nhất định không chịu làm nô lệ đã vang lên khắp cả nước. Lời kêu gọi toàn dân đứng lên bảo vệ độc lập. Trong cuộc kháng chiến này, giai cấp công nhân, đặc biệt là công nhân các đồn điền cao su tiếp tục đóng một vai trò quan trọng. Tuy các đồn điền cao su phần lớn đã bị chiếm đóng hoặc phá hủy, nhưng những người công nhân không vì thế mà từ bỏ cuộc đấu tranh. Họ tham gia vào các đội quân du kích tổ chức phá hoại các cơ sở sản xuất của Pháp, cắt đứt các tuyến đường tiếp tế của quân đội thực dân. Nhiều công nhân đã trở thành những chiến sĩ cách mạng, tham gia các đội vũ trang và trực tiếp cầm súng chiến đấu. Ở một số vùng họ tổ chức các đội quân tự vệ bảo vệ quê hương, cơ sở sản xuất và tiếp tục đấu tranh dưới mọi hình thức. Những người công nhân này hiểu rằng cuộc chiến giành độc lập không chỉ diễn ra ngay trong chiến trường mà còn trong mọi ngõ ngách của đời sống hàng ngày. Không chỉ góp sức trong chiến đấu, giai cấp công nhân còn tham gia tích cực vào các hoạt động kinh tế để duy trì và phát triển đất nước trong hoàn cảnh chiến tranh. Họ lao động sản xuất trong điều kiện khắc nghiệt, thiếu thốn nhưng vẫn quyết tâm cung cấp đủ lương thực, thực phẩm, vũ khí cho mặt trận. Cuộc kháng chiến chống Pháp kéo dài 9 năm với đỉnh cao là chiến dịch Điện Biên Phủ vào năm 1954. Trong chiến dịch này, quân và dân Việt Nam đã giành chiến thắng vang dội trước quân Pháp, làm sụp đổ hoàn toàn kế hoạch tái chiếm Đông Dương của thực dân. Chiến thắng Điện Biên Phủ không chỉ là kết quả của sự lãnh đạo tài tình của Đảng Cộng sản và Chủ tịch Hồ Chí Minh, mà còn là sự hy sinh to lớn của hàng triệu người dân Việt Nam, trong đó có những người công nhân đồn điền cao su. Họ đã đóng góp bằng mồ hôi, máu và cả mạng sống của mình để làm nên chiến thắng này. Hiệp định Geneva được ký kết vào vòng 5 tháng 7 năm 1950 đã chính thức chấm dứt chiến tranh tại Đông Dương. Theo hiệp định này, Việt Nam tạm thời bị chia cắt làm hai miền: miền Bắc do chính phủ Việt Nam Dân chủ Cộng hòa lãnh đạo, miền Nam do chính quyền quốc gia Việt Nam thân Pháp cai quản, chuẩn bị cho cuộc tổng tuyển cử thống nhất đất nước vào năm 1956. Cuộc kháng chiến chống Pháp kéo dài 9 năm với đỉnh cao là chiến dịch Điện Biên Phủ vào năm 1954. Trong chiến dịch này, quân và dân Việt Nam đã giành được chiến thắng vang dội trước thực dân Pháp, làm sụp đổ hoàn toàn kế hoạch tái chiếm Đông Dương của thực dân. Chiến thắng Điện Biên Phủ không chỉ là kết quả của sự lãnh đạo tài tình của Đảng Cộng sản và Chủ tịch Hồ Chí Minh, mà còn là sự hy sinh to lớn của hàng triệu người dân Việt Nam, trong đó có những người công nhân đồn điền cao su. Họ đã đóng góp bằng mồ hôi, máu và cả mạng sống của mình. Hiệp định Geneva được ký kết vào tháng 7 năm 1954 đã chính thức chấm dứt chiến tranh tại Đông Dương. Theo hiệp định này, Việt Nam tạm thời chia cắt làm hai miền: miền Bắc do chính phủ Việt Nam Dân chủ Cộng hòa lãnh đạo và miền Nam do chính quyền quốc gia Việt Nam thân Pháp lãnh đạo, chuẩn bị cho cuộc tổng tuyển cử thống nhất đất nước vào năm 1956. Sau khi miền Bắc được hoàn toàn giải phóng, đất nước chưa hoàn toàn độc lập và thống nhất, miền Nam vẫn nằm dưới sự kiểm soát của các thế lực phản động và thực dân mới. Trong bối cảnh đó, nhiệm vụ của giai cấp công nhân và nhân dân miền Bắc là xây dựng xã hội, củng cố lực lượng để tiếp tục đấu tranh giải phóng miền Nam. Những công nhân từng làm việc tại đồn điền cao su đã trở thành những người tiên phong trong công cuộc tái thiết và phát triển kinh tế miền Bắc. Họ tham gia vào các công trình xây dựng, phát triển các khu công nghiệp và tiếp tục truyền bá tinh thần cách mạng đến thế hệ trẻ. Những bài học từ cuộc đấu tranh chống thực dân Pháp đã trở thành kinh nghiệm quý báu để họ đối mặt với những thách thức trong công cuộc xây dựng đất nước. Cuộc hành trình của giai cấp công nhân Việt Nam từ những ngày đầu bóc lột tàn bạo trong các đồn điền cao su đến khi trở thành những chiến sĩ cách mạng kiên cường đã chứng minh hùng hồn cho sức mạnh, tinh thần đoàn kết và ý chí đấu tranh của nhân dân. Chiến thắng Điện Biên Phủ và hiệp định Geneva đã mở ra một chương mới trong lịch sử Việt Nam, nhưng cũng đặt ra nhiều thách thức cho đất nước. Trong những năm tháng sau này, giai cấp công nhân tiếp tục đóng vai trò quan trọng trong cuộc đấu tranh giải phóng miền Nam và thống nhất đất nước. Những câu chuyện về họ, về những hy sinh và công hiến của họ sẽ tiếp tục được viết tiếp trong phần sau của cuộc hành trình lịch sử này. Hãy cùng chúng tôi tiếp tục khám phá trang sử hào hùng ấy trong phần tiếp theo khi chúng ta bước vào giai đoạn kháng chiến chống Mỹ và thống nhất đất nước.
Tonight on Dateline.
There was tape all around the property. My grandma told me that my dad and Karen's been shot and killed.
It was violent. They called it a crime of passion.
Someone with a lot of rage in them had to do that.
We didn't have DNA, fingerprints, anything like that.
The family felt like you weren't doing enough because there's no arrest.
Yeah, I know it's incredibly frustrating for them.
You put your detective hat on.
I had a digital recorder. I was able to record both sides of the conversation.
Why did you tell the detective about that? Give some proof showing you were involved.
I wanted the truth. There's finally an arrest.
We were delighted.
This case is based on rage and obsession.
You have to testify. It was terrifying. I put on my game face. You're not gonna intimidate me.
A determined daughter forced to come face to face with a cold-blooded killer. I'm Lester Holt, and this is Dateline. Here's Andrea Kenning with Deadly Obsession.
The 4th exploded on a Thursday that year, blazing its way into a long weekend.
So there's fireworks, hot dogs, parades. Everybody's just kind of having a good time, enjoying life.
One couple had extra reason to celebrate. You had never seen Mike and Karen so happy.
No, they were especially happy that night.
With no reason to think the fun would end anytime soon. You had no idea something was coming that was going to rock your family to the core.
No idea.
I thought that I heard gunshots, and even though it was July, they didn't sound like firecrackers.
The police would show up. There'd be plenty of theories.
When he told me what had happened, I knew who did it. This is that crazy psychopath.
But would there be enough evidence? You've got all these receipts and gas, and you're doing all the math, but
Nothing physical, no.
the only thing certain in that moment, two people in love were gone. Their celebration over. It was the end of a long 4th of July weekend. Mike Sisko and Karen Harkness had planned a small cookout for that Sunday afternoon, July 7th, 2002. Just the two of them and their parents on the back deck of Karen's house in Topeka, Kansas. Carol Sisko is Mike's mother.
They had invited us for a fish fry, and so the Wurzwicks and I had got there about the same time.
So this is Karen's parents?
Yes. And so we all got out of the car, knocked on the door, no one answered. So we went around to the back.
They saw the sliding glass door was slightly open. They stepped inside, into the kitchen, took a bottle of wine out of the fridge, and made themselves comfortable.
We were on the main floor, and they had a brochure of Jamaica on the table, too.
Fun trip planned.
Yes. And we looked around. I mean, we could tell that they had planned dinner. And,
yeah, they should have been...
And it was about time
starting
to
to
eat.
cook and have the food out.
Yeah, we hollered for the kids and started looking around.
Karen's dad headed downstairs to her bedroom. Within minutes, he was back. His face pale.
He says they've been shot. And
oh my gosh. I mean, this is... How do you...
He wouldn't let me go downstairs. And I'm so glad he didn't.
She was stunned. Her son Mike and his girlfriend Karen were dead.
911, what's your emergency? We just gone to our daughter's house. She's downstairs and she's dead.
Surprising that you would get a call like that here?
Yeah, it's not usual to get that type of call out here. There's not a lot of gunshots, not a lot of violence out here.
Richard Foley was a homicide detective for Topeka's police department back then. He was on the scene within minutes of getting the call.
I'd seen murder-suicides before, and that was the first thought that came to my mind. In that neighborhood, it's typically not going to be crime, a typical crime. It's going to be a family affair, and somebody shoots somebody and shoots themselves. And that's what I believed I was walking into.
So this is your gut feeling.
Right.
He talked briefly with Karen's dad, then headed downstairs.
I didn't turn on any lights when I went down there, just used my flashlight. I could tell there were casings down there. I could tell there were multiple shots.
At first, the detective saw Karen face down on her bed. She had been shot at least twice. He assumed Mike had killed her before turning the gun on himself. But when he walked to the other side of the bed, he found Mike. His body was on the floor, wedged between the wall and bed, as if he just tumbled off.
And he'd been shot multiple times, too.
So this idea that this could be a murder-suicide quickly goes out the window.
Yeah, it's obviously not a murder-suicide.
And how could you tell that?
Because, well, when there was no gun present, way too many rounds in both of them to be a murder-suicide.
Of all the crimes you'd seen in your career, how bad was this one?
I've seen some pretty bad ones, but this was significant.
There's a killer at large.
Yes.
Killer you need to find.
Yes.
He had no idea an investigative and legal saga was just beginning. It would span more than 20 years.
It was a long search, and we searched a lot of places. It was a needle in a haystack.
And take trial after trial after trial. This is a soap opera moment.
Yeah. It was sick.
Very, very bizarre.
I wanted the truth. I'm telling the truth. And I'm doing the right thing. And I'm not moving.
"47-year-old Mike Sisko and 53-year-old Karen Harkness had been found murdered in her basement bedroom. Detective Richard Foley was trying to make sense out of what he was seeing.
What could you tell as far as just how many times they'd been shot, where they'd been shot?
Well, I didn't spend a lot of time counting. I knew it was multiple times by the casings. It appeared that he'd been shot in the belly and then rolled over, and he took the sheets and covers with him as he rolled off the bed. But then somebody stood over him and shot down into him, as evidenced by the rounds that we found underneath him.
He figured the couple had been sleeping when their killer opened fire. Do you believe that the perpetrator was inside the house waiting for them, or do you think they came in after? Any idea?
My belief is the person came in after. But in looking for hiding places, somebody could have hidden in there, but it didn't really make sense to me. It seemed to make more sense that they came in afterwards, waited until they went to sleep, and then snuck in the house.
He was certain after he looked around a bit more. Was there any forced entry into Karen's
forced
place?
entry. No. The sliding door was ajar, but Mike and Karen smoked on the back deck of the house and didn't lock the door, which in Southwest Topeka, that's probably not that unusual.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of people would probably do that.
And I believe that's the way the person entered.
As police continued investigating the scene, Karen's parents and Mike's mom were busy calling their families.
My grandma called me and just asked me if I could come to Karen's house. And I said, sure.
Mike's daughter Haley was 17 at the time.
When I got to Karen's, there was tape all around the property.
What a shock to the system.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I honestly didn't even think, there was something going on at Karen's house.
Who told you the
And
news?
I sat down and I think it was my grandma that told me that they had been shot and killed.
My gosh, your reaction to that. I mean, just
unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I was just in shock. I don't think I said 2 words.
Her grandmother continued calling the rest of the family.
She said something awful's happened.
Mike's sister, Kathy Boots, and her husband Mark could hardly believe it. They had just seen Mike a week earlier. They'd been fishing together.
He always had a great story to tell, and he was just the best in every way.
Always upbeat, they said, despite having weathered a divorce 4 years earlier. Mike was traveling constantly as a salesman.
What are we having, Uncle Mike?
And raising 2 kids.
This candle is for looks plus smell.
He really felt like that this was just a tough patch they could get through, I think.
Okay, smile real big, Mike. Let's see your teeth. Oh, those are nice.
And then he met Karen during a night out with friends. She was also divorced with 2 kids. After that, his family said you couldn't keep the smile off his face.
He lightened up when he met Karen. Yeah. It really lightened him up.
Was this a fresh start for Mike?
Yes.
I think he felt so.
Yeah, he really loved her, and she's a very interesting person, beautiful, athletic, outgoing, had lots of friends.
Including her own adult children, Chad and Aaron.
She was the best mom and the best friend I could have ever hoped for. I could count on her to make me feel better no matter what the circumstances were. She always had the right things to say and always the best advice.
I could get down on myself if I was having a bad day, but she was always there to pick me up and make me feel better.
Cheering you on, keep going.
Absolutely, yes.
Karen knew how to draw people in. Her friend Linda Bryden saw it every day at the Topeka Tourism Office where they worked together.
Our personality was perfect because we would go to trade shows and try and meet event planners, bring their events here possibly, and she was really good at it.
Karen and Mike had just been to Linda's house for the 4th.
And her and Mike both said, yeah, we're getting old and fat, but we're happy. So they were in love.
Were Mike and Karen talking marriage?
They were.
What were their plans?
The week before the murder, I talked to Mike, and he was asking me where's a good place to go on a honeymoon in the Caribbean. I said, St. Thomas is great. Lots of really good places to go, and he was real happy about it.
That's likely why he had that brochure on his table, the one his mom saw. It was there among recent photos and a coffee cup. That cup caught the detective's eye.
There was a coffee cup found on the kitchen table in the house, and a coffee cup in Mike's vehicle out in the parking lot in the driveway.
Suggesting the couple had been out shortly before their deaths. But where? Maybe it was a place where luck, the good and the bad, collide. Did you see them on the video?
We found them on the video.
Lead detective Richard Foley was working the case of his career, a double homicide with the killer still at large. So far, all he had was a lot of unanswered questions. The biggest unknown, who would want to kill Karen and Mike? And even more baffling, why?
Honestly, I'm going through robbery, burglary, that kind of thing.
Foley and his team began at the beginning, tracking the couple's whereabouts during their last hours alive. One of their first leads, those 2 coffee cups found at the scene.
From a convenience store?
From a convenience store.
Foley's investigators traced the cups to a gas station near a casino called Sack and Fox. Had the couple spent time there?
Your investigators spoke to a neighbor about a conversation with Mike the night before?
Yes. The next door neighbor had spoken to Mike, and they'd mentioned that they were going to the casino that night.
Detectives made a beeline for the Sack and Fox.
We went to the casino, got with the security people, got all the videotape that we could.
Did you see them on the video?
We found them on the video and kind of through the cameras walked through the casino with them to the different slot machines that they'd played at.
And are they having a good time? Does anything seem out of sorts?
No, they're just a regular couple having a good time that night.
Foley wondered if they'd won some money and attracted the wrong kind of attention.
Did you think that maybe someone followed them from the casino to rob them of their winnings?
Yes.
Anyone following them inside the casino?
No one followed them. They didn't have any confrontations with anybody.
Just before 1:30 a.m., Karen and Mike left the casino.
Did the cameras follow them outside?
Followed them out, at least to the parking lot. When they get out to the parking lot, it's dark. It's late at night, so I don't believe it gets them all the way to their car.
Is it possible that there was someone near their car that just wasn't picked up?
It could have been.
Foley's investigators also paid a visit to that gas station.
We obtained videotape from that store and found that they had in fact gone in there, gotten coffee. That's where the coffee cups came from.
Minutes later, the couple could be seen pulling out in Mike's Ford Expedition.
Anyone suspicious around them or anything going on with Mike and Karen?
No, there was no one around the store. Nobody followed them in, followed them out. They were by themselves.
So that kind of, puts a damper on the possible idea of someone following them from the casino.
Right. It doesn't appear that they were followed at all.
Investigators believe the couple drove straight home from there.
There was a report from one of the neighbors that they'd heard a car slam around 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Which fits with your timeline.
Yeah, that's probably Mike and Karen coming home, that they heard car door slam.
Then, another sound. Michelle Delgado was 18 at the time and living a few doors down with her mother.
I was kind of tossing and turning, wasn't really sleeping. I was still pretty much awake. I heard a car idling outside the front of the house, and I thought that was weird, just given the time that it was.
And then she heard something even louder, several pops in a row.
Even though it was July, they didn't sound like firecrackers, and it wasn't like a lot of them. And then they, just as quickly as they started, they stopped.
Hours later, her neighbors were found dead.
There were police cars on the street, helicopters overhead, police tape on our neighborhood, and I still remember really vividly, my mom just looked at me and she's like, I don't think those were fireworks that you heard.
Crime scene investigators spent hours processing the house, but in the end, they determined nothing of value was taken.
In the basement, Mike had $900 plus, and Karen had $200 or $300 in her clothes, and her purse was there. Everything was there that should have been there, and it didn't appear like anything had been taken.
So any jewelry?
No, nothing.
Any electronics?
Everything seemed to be there.
So if robbery wasn't the motive, maybe the autopsies would offer a clue. The coroner's report revealed that Karen took 3 bullets in the shoulder, 1 in her arm, and 1 in the buttocks. Mike was shot at least once in the back, twice in his chest, and twice in the stomach.
Did this feel very personal to you? The locations, the number of shots fired, the location of the victims in bed?
Yes. Yeah, we have to look at what the shot selection tells us, and the number of shots, what it tells us. If you consider a 10-round magazine with 1 in the gun, that's 11. That means somebody's most likely emptied their gun.
Oh my goodness.
Emptied, shot it dry.
That sounds like rage.
Yes, exactly. And that's what it looked like, was rage.
Someone's sending a message with this killing, these killings.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
A message for sure, but from whom?
The police are looking at everyone, initially as a possible suspect.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Including you.
Yep.
The families of Karen and Mike thought they might hear word of an engagement that Sunday afternoon. Instead, loved ones like Mike's sister Kathy and her husband Mark were processing news of the couple's murder.
It hit us all pretty hard, really hard. I was used to talking to him most every day, and Mark was used to talking to him and doing things with him, and it left a huge void, a huge void.
It really changed our lives.
It was awful.
Karen's son, Chad.
Sunday evenings were usually our night alone. Before the start of a work week, we'd go out and have some chips and salsa, maybe a couple margaritas, and talk about the last week, the coming week, and spend a couple hours together most Sunday evenings.
But on Sunday night, July 7th, Chad was spending time with lead detective Voley at the Topeka Police Department, where the conversation was anything but comforting.
The police are looking at everyone, initially as a possible suspect.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Including you.
Yep. I sit there and being asked, did you murder your mother? Did you murder Mike? I just remember, I can't believe this is happening. This is real. I had to pinch myself to make sure I wasn't just having a horrible dream.
They asked you to take a polygraph?
Yes.
For Detective Voley, no one in the couple's orbit was in the clear. You have to start talking to everyone in their circle.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people. They have a lot of friends, a lot of family.
Yep.
Where do you start?
You generally start just in the center. I mean, with the immediate family.
That also included Chad's father, Karen's ex-husband. The divorce had been Karen's idea, not his.
She was just ready to move on and be more happy in life than she was.
You brought him in for an interview?
Yes.
So, was there any thought that this divorce maybe wasn't amicable? Or there was some money perhaps at play for Karen's ex, or jealousy that he may have wanted to get, Mike and Karen out of the picture?
Certainly, yeah.
He too was asked to take a polygraph. Voley and his team also took a closer look at Mike's side of the family. That included his 2 teenage children, Haley and Dustin.
Mike's son, Dustin, you learned was out of town.
Yes. He was on a canoe trip in Missouri.
Lots of eyeballs on him.
Yes.
Around the time of the killing.
Yes.
Voley also learned that Mike had a good relationship with Dustin, but things between father and daughter had been strained.
I wasn't home when he wanted me to come home, and I was just really, I was really doing my own thing.
So you were fighting with your dad?
Yeah.
Things went from bad to worse when Mike started dating Karen.
He did spend a lot of time with Karen, and so I felt like I wasn't replaced, but I wasn't as special.
Then Haley started seeing a guy named Chris.
Your dad, at the time, didn't think you were ready for this serious relationship?
Well, me and Chris hung out a lot, and my dad didn't really like Chris.
Just a few weeks before the murders, Mike and Haley's issues reached a boiling point.
My dad told me that I needed to follow his rules, be home at curfew and that kind of thing, or I'd have to move out. And so I moved in with Chris and his family.
So there's a lot of problems going on between Haley and her boyfriend and Mike.
Yes.
You had to take a hard look at that.
Sure.
We weren't really getting along for a little while.
The day after the murders, the detective asked Haley to come in for an interview. She told Voley she was with Chris at his parents' house in North Topeka the night Mike and Karen were killed.
This is a hard question I have to ask you, but do you think you have any ideas what happened?
I don't know.
Haley went on to suggest a theory police had already ruled out, that the crime was connected to Karen and Mike's casino winnings.
I'm thinking about it because they went to the casino the night before, and they would have won a lot of money.
During a break, she seemed to whisper a prayer.
Please help me. Help me.
And appeared to get emotional. Still, Haley's rift with her father was hard to ignore.
How many times have we seen a child is upset with the parents, kills them so, they can be out of the picture and go on to live, a nice life? Was that something that you considered?
Oh, we considered everything.
Then, not long after the murders, the detective got a big tip.
I believe it was a bank alert. A check was discovered that had been cashed on Mike's account. It's just a blank check forged.
Someone was stealing from Mike's bank account.
Wow, this must really pique your interest.
Certainly.
Somebody pretending to be Mike.
Right.
Did you think it was possible that the killer might have cashed the check?
It's obviously something we have to run down.
A new lead that would point Voley to someone close to Mike's inner circle. Close enough to kill? Investigators were running down a promising lead in the double homicide of Mike and Karen. Someone forged Mike's signature on one of his checks.
The first thing you do is try to find out who it was that cashed it.
And they did. It was a small-time criminal, one who had a connection to Haley's boyfriend. Was that a friend of Chris's?
An associate. I wouldn't say a friend. Somebody that would have known him.
Did it lead you to focus back on Chris, that maybe Chris had something to do with Mike's murder and then gave his associate the checkbook?
Obviously, we had to rule it out.
Turns out, though, the guy who forged the check was in jail the night of the murders. So he's out as the killer.
Yes.
But that didn't put the young couple in the clear. The detective had to be sure. Haley and Chris, you did have them take polygraph tests.
Yes. People react to polygraphs in different ways. If they're just, let's get it over with. When can we do it? If they have that kind of attitude, that we look at them one way. If they're like, maybe I will, then we look at them a different way.
Did Haley and Chris easily agree to a polygraph?
Yes.
They passed?
Yes.
And their alibis checked out, as did those given by Karen's ex and her son Chad. They were all cleared. I can't even imagine the feeling when the police are looking at everyone around you. Your family members, Mike's family members.
Yeah. But, you gotta start somewhere, and eliminate and narrow it down to who really committed such a horrible act.
But the next name on the detective's list seemed an unlikely one. Mike's ex-wife, Dana Chandler. Unlikely because she had recently moved to Denver, which was an 8-hour drive from Topeka.
Okay, all right.
So she's not even in the area.
She's not in the area. So it sits in the back of my mind that, here's the person we have to check on, because it's not likely somebody is driving 500 miles to do this.
Dana and Mike had lived in Colorado when their kids were young, and it's where Haley felt particularly close to her dad.
We loved being in the mountains and just hiking, fishing and camping and all that stuff. He taught us how to do all of it. I remember I would, hook my own worm and unhook my own fish. I mean, we were really into it.
Haley said her mom, who stayed home to raise her and her brother, worked hard to keep the household running.
She had the nice car, and she always wanted to look nice, and she was very busy.
Would you describe it as kind of a typical family?
Yeah, we had a backyard with the dog, we had the sandbox, all the fun stuff, as kids.
But those happy memories masked a troubled family.
There was always just arguing, just like the constant tone of the household that we were just accustomed to because that's all we knew.
Mike and Dana were married for about 15 years when they got divorced.
They tried to get back together and make it work. It just didn't last.
It wasn't to be. Your dad ends up getting full custody of you and your brother?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
The custody was a battle. My mom really wanted us. My dad really wanted us. My mom was found to be really unhealthy and was drinking quite a bit at the time. And so when my dad got custody, she moved to live with her sister to try to get a handle on her alcohol problem.
Ann Hammer, who met Dana in AA, says Dana worked hard to get her life back together. Both were recovering alcoholics and became instant best friends. What do you think it was about you and Dana that you wanted to spend more time with her?
Well, Dana was friendly. She was kind. She did not have custody of her children. And at the time, I did not have custody of my daughter. And that really kind of formed a bond between us as mothers.
Did Dana miss her kids? Did she want to get them back?
Yes, she did. She did very much.
Anne says Dana was driven, had gone back to school to get her master's degree in accounting. She also remembers the fun times they had together, like at a New Year's Eve party where she grabbed this photo of Dana. And just 2 days before the murders, during that long 4th of July holiday, she and Dana spent an enjoyable day in the mountains together. The next time you hear from Dana, she has some terrible news to share with you.
Mm-hmm. She called and told me that Mike had died, and she was extremely upset.
What was she saying?
She was crying. I really couldn't get a lot out of her.
Did you worry about Dana?
I did, sure. She was my friend, and she was upset.
Later that week, Dana drove down to Topeka for Mike's funeral. Detective Foley had already spoken to Dana on the phone, but figured while she was in town, they could meet.
She agreed to an interview, but it had to be in her lawyer's office.
So she had retained a lawyer?
Yes.
While we're here, we're looking into the death of your ex-husband and his hardness.
What was your first impression of her? What was her demeanor like when you meet in this attorney's
She was
office?
calm. She was reserved, very put together.
Dana spoke so softly, she could barely be heard on the police recording.
You never lived here.
Did she offer any suspects for you of someone she thought might have wanted Mike and Karen dead?
No, she just said generally that Mike had a propensity for getting himself in trouble.
Like the time she said Mike got into a bar fight years earlier. And when the detective asked where she was the night of the murders, Dana said she was in her Colorado apartment. In fact, she shared what she did that entire weekend, saying she spent most of her Saturday shopping.
She went to the King supermarket, she went to Target, she went to the AutoZone, and she went to the gas station.
After a night alone, she said she got up early Sunday to drive 2 hours west to Granby, Colorado. There, she went hiking by herself for a few hours. And she could prove she'd been to many of those places she stopped at that weekend. She had receipts. All that's adding up.
All that's adding up. I mean, the errands were absolutely, that was certain that she did that. There was no question on that.
The interview ended, and it seemed like a dead end. But was there more to her story?
And I said, what was purchased? And he said, 2 5-gallon gas cans and a cigarette lighter.
Why would she need gas cans?
That's what we didn't know. That's what we had to try to find out.
A week after the murders, grief was suffocating both families.
I think I laid in bed most of the time after that, and I don't remember functioning much. I guess that's how I handle things.
You must have heard from so many people saying how much they missed your mom, how much they love your mom.
Yes. She had told me in our conversations throughout the years what she, kind of envisioned for after she would pass. She said, don't sit around and cry. Have a party.
Aww.
And we went to her favorite spot in Topeka, and the owner had 2 chairs set up, one for Mike and one for my mom, and he'd bought them both their favorite drinks and had them on the chairs.
Oh my gosh, you're
for
gonna make
them.
me cry.
I know. It was pretty great.
Detective Voley had been asking the families a lot of questions. And he was still looking at Mike's ex-wife Dana, who seemed to have a strong alibi. Did you actually retrace her steps of where she said she was?
Yes, through the King Supers and the Target and the AutoZone and the gas station.
First, that AutoZone visit.
She had a newer car, so I'm thinking, what on earth could a person in her situation buy at AutoZone?
Dana told him she bought a cigarette lighter and didn't mention anything else. But Dana's bank statement, which showed the total but not what Dana actually bought, indicated more than just a lighter.
Well, I called up the AutoZone and said, can you check back through your receipts? And he went back through and I said, what was purchased? And he said, 2 5-gallon gas cans and a cigarette lighter.
Why would she need gas cans?
That's what we didn't know. That's what we had to try to find out.
The detective became more curious after he subpoenaed her cell phone records.
The phone records were blank from 3 o'clock on Saturday till 7 o'clock on Sunday.
Blank as in the phone wasn't used?
The phone was not used during that 27-hour period. I didn't just have that period of time to look at. I had a period of time before that. There was no other blank periods of that length.
So she was regularly using her phone?
She was regularly using her phone. That period stood out.
And there was something else about Dana's story, that she drove west from Denver and went hiking in the mountains.
To get from Granby, where she said she hiked, the most direct route is through Rocky Mountain National Park, which has video at both ends at the guard gates.
I covered a murder there for Dateline. They record your vehicle.
Everyone that comes through there.
Was she on there?
We sent detectives out there, and they obtained the video from both ends of the park to make sure that she had not gone through there, and she hadn't.
So the detective figured Dana wasn't telling the truth about where she was. And Dana's account was even more wobbly after he got a call from one of her friends expressing concern. His name was Jeff. Jeff told the detective Dana had asked him to help out with her attorney's fees following the murders. But first he wanted to know more.
He's asking her questions like I would ask. Where were you? Can you prove that you weren't involved in this? She said, I left Saturday and went for a drive in the mountains, and I didn't come back till Sunday night. And he said, well, you got a hotel receipt or something? And she says, I slept in my car. Okay, Well, did you see anybody? Did you see the fires that were out there?
Like big fires?
Big forest fires.
So she says she's sleeping in her car, but there's forest fires around the area?
Yeah.
Jeff was skeptical, and so was Detective Voley. Because Dana told him she spent Saturday night in her Denver apartment and left for the mountains on Sunday morning. He started putting the pieces together. A shifting alibi, an off-the-grid cell phone, and 2 gas cans. And he had a huge light bulb moment.
She could get to Topeka and out of Kansas without stopping for gas.
Instead of heading west to go hiking, what if Dana really drove more than 500 miles east on I-70 to Kansas to kill Mike and Karen? This is the highway that you think Dana Chandler took to get to Topeka from Denver?
Yes.
You had a feeling that even though Dana Chandler had the gas cans, she may have stopped somewhere along the way between Denver and Topeka, perhaps to use the restroom.
I thought it was a possibility that she would have. And just to cover our bases, I sent a couple detectives on I-70 and hitting every gas station, convenience store along I-70 to try to find video or any evidence that she had been at any of those places.
You're trying to catch her driving to Topeka?
Yes.
None of the gas stations had security camera video of Dana or her car. But about halfway along the route, in Kansas, the detective got lucky.
There was a clerk that was 70% sure that she had seen Dana on Saturday night, which would have been appropriate to the time it took her to travel from Denver to Topeka.
Are they showing a photo then?
They showed her a photo, and she said, yeah, that lady looks familiar. I think she stopped here.
Still, he knew he needed more. Was there anything at all that placed her in Topeka during the window of the murders?
As far as physical evidence, no.
That's a challenge for you. Yes. You had no DNA, no fingerprints,
right.
No solid evidence placing Dana Chandler in Topeka, no murder weapon,
right.
No confession, no eyewitness seeing her go into the house. None of that.
Right. It doesn't mean she wasn't there, just we haven't found the physical evidence.
2 months after the murders, he dropped in on Dana's close friend, Anne. You get a surprise visit at work.
Right, from Detective Voley and another plainclothes detective. They had told me that Mike and his fiancée had been murdered.
Up to this point, all you knew was that Mike was dead, and that was it. And now it's a double homicide?
Right.
And Dana might be involved?
Right.
What is your reaction as you're hearing this?
I was shocked. I said, no way did she do this. I couldn't even imagine that she had anything to do with it. I didn't see a mean bone in her body. I had been friends with Dana for years, and it was shocking. I just couldn't believe it.
It would take more than 2 decades to put the whole story together. After secrets crawled out into the open.
I had been recording our conversations.
And danger never seemed far away. Did you worry your mom might try to seek revenge on you?
Absolutely.
I'm sure your stomach is turning.
Yes.
Yeah, it was sickening. It was crushing.
This is the mother-daughter showdown for the ages.
Absolutely.
Dana Chandler was now the focus of the investigation. Police weren't buying all of her alibi, especially where she said she traveled that weekend. And they were discovering more about her. According to Mike's family and friends, Dana did not move on after the divorce, and she wanted to make sure Mike didn't either. Caught in the middle was Mike's new love, Karen.
It started to get really, really bad. She would be in my office crying. She said it was just awful.
Linda said her friend would come to her with stories of Mike's out-of-control ex-wife. Describe the phone calls that Karen would get.
They would typically be in the middle of the night and call, hang up, call, hang up, call, hang up, call and say horrible, vile things, call Karen names.
Karen began to wonder if her relationship with Mike could survive.
She loved Mike, but she didn't know if she could live with someone being that intrusive into their lives and manipulative.
Did she think about breaking up with Mike?
She shared with some of us that she didn't know if she could do this.
Investigators learned that type of behavior had gone on for years. That Dana even sent graphic messages about Mike and Karen's sex life to her daughter, had called Karen a tramp.
I just said, I don't want to hear about this. Why are you bringing me into this? But I just knew that she did not like Karen at all, and she just was really angry at my dad. She would verbally attack my dad in public, and and it would happen at soccer games.
The school play?
Yeah.
So people are seeing this.
Yeah, it's really embarrassing.
The movie Fatal Attraction really comes to mind when you think about some of the actions of your mom.
Yeah, it didn't seem real. It was just hard to comprehend.
Karen's son thought Dana couldn't accept her ex having a new relationship.
She just, I guess, couldn't handle the fact that he didn't care for her anymore.
Mike's sister said she too witnessed some of Dana's behavior during a stay at his house.
It must have been 1 or 2 in the morning. I'd woken up and the light was on out back, and we opened the blinds, and it was Dana jumping on the trampoline. The trampoline was near the house, so we could hear it, and then she just started laughing, hysterically.
She says Mike also told her about a chilling incident that happened a few weeks before the killings.
Mike came home one day after work, and the kids were still in school, and found her sitting in his breezeway that had been locked with a cup of coffee. And he said, "What are you doing here? I'm calling 911. And she said, no, wait a minute. The kids are both at ages where they really need us. I think we should get back together." Just very calmly. And he said, "Are you kidding me?"
For Mike, the strange encounter cemented something he'd been thinking about for some time.
He called me right after. He said, "I'm marrying Karen."
Then, days before the murders, on that fishing trip with his brother-in-law, Mike shared a chilling premonition.
Mike said, "When I'm gone, please make sure that the kids are raised properly and have what they need." I said, "Are you really serious?" He said, "Yes, something's going to happen. When Dana finds out that Karen and he were going to marry, that's going to be the trigger." And that was the last time I saw him alive.
Karen's son suspected Dana from the beginning.
I knew who did it. I mean, I said I know that this is that crazy psychopath Chandler that did it.
The detective felt he had built a solid case against Dana. There was her harassing behavior, her suspicious cell records, and the witness along I-70 who thought she saw Dana the night of the murders. She's a good witness.
She's a really good witness, yes.
Still, the local district attorney didn't think the case was provable beyond a reasonable doubt. The DA didn't think everything you'd gathered was enough.
They didn't believe there was enough evidence to take it to court.
How frustrating was that for you?
Even though I knew in my heart we were on the right track, the DA didn't agree, so we keep moving forward.
Months would turn into years. Then a setback. That key witness, the gas station clerk, passed away. Does this become a cold case, or do you say, I'm not giving up, I'm going to keep searching for that evidence that the DA needs?
I made a promise to Karen's dad. When he wasn't convinced that the investigation was progressing fast enough or far enough, I said, I've got 12 years before I retire. I will have this case that whole 12 years. Nobody else is going to get it. It's going to be mine.
During the long wait, Mike's daughter found her days filled with regret.
I was wrestling so badly with the guilt that I had from being so terrible to my dad and never being able to say I was sorry. And I just wanted to do something to redeem myself.
And she started having uncomfortable thoughts about her mom.
I really wanted to find out who did it. And I needed to know if it was my mom.
You put your detective hat on.
Yeah, I did.
Haley was about to go undercover.
It was completely my plan.
It was 2005, 3 years after the murders, and there had been no arrest.
I think that Detective Oley had his whole heart in solving this murder, but he couldn't do it by himself.
For you, it felt like the murders fell through the cracks.
Yeah.
Without answers, Haley found herself asking the toughest question of all. Did your mind go there that could my mom be capable of doing this? Is that possible?
Yeah, it did. It was hard to believe that my mom would actually kill them, but I couldn't think of anyone else who would have done it.
By then, she was living in Colorado with her boyfriend Chris, and was more determined than ever to find out what happened to her dad and Karen. So she embarked on a bold new approach to investigate her mom, herself. Are the police involved at all? Have they asked you to?
It was completely my plan. I came up with the idea myself.
A fire was lit.
Yeah.
Haley, just 20 years old, began secretly recording conversations with her mother. Take us to this moment where you first decide to record your mom.
I had already been talking to her from time to time, and I questioned her about it. I really wanted the truth. Recording recording it wasn't hard.
Was this over the phone? Did you meet
Yeah,
somewhere?
so I really only had a recorder for my phone, so I would record our phone conversations.
Honestly, like throughout all this, it just seems like you don't want to help. Hey, I had no involvement. I have no idea what your dad and Karen were doing when they were involved with.
In a span of about 4 years, Haley made 6 recordings. At times, it was clear she was torn.
I want things to be normal. You're my mom. No, I just need to hear will get nothing to do with it. Okay?
I'm not going to make her say anything. She's going to say what she's going to say. I'm just recording it. I'm asking legitimate questions.
One of Haley's first probing questions was one also gnawing at the detective. Why did her mom buy those gas cans?
You had a couple gas cans, Mom. I mean, it's that question right there. Help me get beyond that. I don't want to be there.
Her mom told her something she'd never seen before. She got the gas cans as a favor to a woman at AA.
What was her name? Can you get a hold of her? I mean, if she could say that would just be awesome. Karen, I have no idea. No. And I wish that I would have gotten her name. But I didn't.
I was encouraging her to try to prove she didn't do it. And her best convincing evidence that she didn't do it was, Haley, just believe me.
What about her phone?
I would ask her, why did your phone go unanswered?
What's going on with this cell phone? Haley, as far as my cell phone goes, I was not able to pick up a signal in the mountains. Okay, so you went up to the mountains? Yes, okay. I didn't have a signal.
You're trying to catch your mom in a trap.
That was definitely the gamble. I wasn't sure if it was even going to work.
But then you started to get somewhere.
Yeah.
You spent the night in the mountains then? Like, that weekend?
She seemed to confirm she was in the mountains, which is what she told her friend Jeff. And that contradicted what she'd told Detective Voley, that she'd spent the night at her apartment. So Haley asked exactly where she was.
What city were you in? Haley, they have all that information. That's where I was.
Are you buying this, what she's telling you?
I'm completely not buying it.
After months of secretly recording her mom, Haley let Detective Voley on her operation. He jumped at the opportunity to get something solid on Dana, so he gave Haley a key fob with a voice recorder hidden inside. Haley met her mom at a restaurant and placed the fob on the table.
How nervous were you as you're recording her?
It was a little nerve-wracking.
It's barely audible due to the noisy restaurant. Haley put her mom on the spot.
At one point, I asked her to just take a polygraph test. That would be one step to show that she didn't do it. And she asked me if I'd ever thought about killing my dad. And I said, no. But she said, well, I have thought about killing him.
That's big.
Yeah. I mean, we can say in passing, like, oh, I could kill him, But to think about killing someone to the extent that you're worried it will show up on a polygraph test, that's pretty bad.
What did you think when you heard that?
That's just another one of those little pieces that we put into that pile of evidence that she has on audio admitting that she thought about it.
Eventually, as Haley kept pressing her mom, Dana shut down.
My attorney has advised me not to talk to anybody about anything about that weekend. And I'm going to take his advice. Okay, I understand, but I don't understand why you can't tell me. I'm just wanting my mom back.
But Dana was dug in.
I say something that doesn't agree with what my first statement was, and I'm taking my story, and I don't want to risk doing that either.
Dana had changed her story, and she left Haley and Detective Voley more convinced than ever that she'd committed the murders.
Haley definitely catches her in some inconsistencies.
Yeah, the inconsistencies on the gas can, that was big. So just saying, yeah, I thought about it, that's important. That gives us something in Dana's own words.
It may have been important, but without a confession, it wasn't enough for the DA to take the case. In 2007, 5 years after the murders, Voley was promoted to sergeant and was transferred out of the detective squad. But he didn't give up hope that something, or someone, would change his luck. And one day, out of the blue, a stranger approached him.
It's going to change everything about this. Everything.
It certainly does.
I don't know how you'd move on without closure, without resolution, without justice, is what it was for me. It wasn't right.
It was 2008, and Haley was starting to lose hope. But what she didn't know was that Sergeant Voley's chance encounter with a stranger would forever change the trajectory of the case. The man was campaigning to be the new DA.
And I said, good luck to you. If you happen to make it, I've got a case I want to present to you. It's the Harkness-Cisco case. He says, I know about it. I'm going to start a cold case unit, and we're going to look at that.
And he got elected.
He was elected. He did start the cold case unit. This was the first case that he looked at. We looked at it for 2 years, just shoring it up as much as we possibly could, until they were comfortable that there was enough evidence there to bring it to court.
What do you think changed?
Perspective is part of it. This one says, if I lose, I lose. But I'm going to go down swinging.
The DA called us in and said, we have, I think, as much as we're ever going to have. Do you want us to charge her and go to trial? Yes. I mean, no hesitation for me.
Is there any conflicting feelings there that you're pushing for your mom to be arrested?
I was really scared because she was going to find out that I had been recording our conversations. So arresting her and taking her to trial was great.
You're terrified of the one woman who is supposed to love you the most in this world.
Absolutely.
Dana Chandler was living in Oklahoma at the time. It was 2011, nearly a decade since Mike and Karen had been killed. Authorities caught up with her in a parking lot and arrested her with guns drawn. She was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Dana pleaded not guilty and went on trial in a Topeka courtroom in March 2012.
We're covering this around the clock every day.
Sherman Smith is editor-in-chief of the Kansas Reflector, covering state politics. Back then, he was an editor for the Topeka Capital Journal.
One of the reasons why the community fixated on this so much was because, it involved a couple of community members in a relatively safe neighborhood, and that just doesn't really happen much in Topeka.
The prosecution argued Dana was the only person who hated Mike and Karen enough to kill them.
The motive has always been that Dana Chandler was so bitter about the failure of her marriage. She despised her ex-husband and despised even more that he was going to be married again.
To prove motive, prosecutors called friends and family, including Haley, who was by then 27. What's that like, going to trial knowing that you'll be helping the prosecution try to put away your mother?
It was terrifying. And it was very awkward. And it was hard to not feel like you are doing something totally wrong and betraying your mom. But I was only doing what was right.
If you believe she did this, then she has to pay.
Yeah. I wanted the jury to know how much she hated them, what she put them through, and...
Karen and Mike?
Yeah.
The prosecutor said Mike was scared of Dana and got a protection from abuse order against her, which she violated. The defense countered that there was no physical evidence tying Dana to the crime scene. It took less than 90 minutes for the jury to find her guilty of both counts of first-degree murder. She was given 2 life sentences.
I was glad for the family. The work I did on the case was shown to be good, so I was happy about that. But still, you're not jumping for joy after somebody gets convicted of a murder because nobody wins.
There weren't any winners that day at all, but we were relieved. To tell you the truth, we were relieved.
Haley, who was just a teenager when her father was killed, says she felt almost reborn.
I felt like my life was starting. That was behind me. And this was the new fresh start, a new beginning. Chris and I got married and we started having kids, and it was great.
Sergeant Voley, who had fulfilled his promise to Karen's dad to never give up on the case, retired in 2014. But this fresh start for all of them came to a screeching halt. You get some news that's going to rock your world.
Yeah. The Kansas Supreme Court overturned the conviction.
In 2018, 6 years after the trial, the state's highest court ruled the prosecutor had misled the jury about that protection from abuse order. It never existed, and the prosecutor knew it. Both murder convictions were tossed.
For me, it felt like the Supreme Court was doing the right thing. That it had become abundantly clear that there were a lot of problems with the way this was prosecuted.
Haley knew that if the state chose not to re-prosecute the case, her mother would walk free. Did you worry your mom might try to seek revenge on you, given that you testified against her the first time?
I was terrified if she would get out of jail. And I had kids now.
Yeah, could she harm one of your children?
Yeah.
Was that a
A fear?
Harming them or just trying to see them in general.
The fate of Dana Chandler's case was in the hands of Mike Kage, the 3rd district attorney to oversee it.
What was your biggest concern going in, deciding to retry this?
Just making sure we made the right decision. We look at the case itself and try and decide what's the right thing here. Does justice demand that we move forward?
Kage believed it did. Dana Chandler would remain behind bars until her retrial. Her case and her cause began attracting attention.
No DNA, no confession, no fingerprint, not even snitch witnesses.
Daryl Burton is the founder of a nonprofit organization called Miracle of Innocence. Its mission is to help those who may have been wrongly accused.
And this is based on your own personal experience.
Yes.
You were wrongfully accused.
Yes, wrongfully accused and faced a death penalty and sent to prison for nearly 25 years, a crime that I didn't commit.
Convicted of murder in 1985 and exonerated in 2008, Daryl believed Dana's case mirrored his own. To him, the lack of physical evidence spoke volumes.
You cannot find a case where you would investigate all of these different, avenues and not find something, some connection. It just doesn't happen.
I think that's what makes this so complicated, is that Dana looks so bad with her behavior towards her ex and his new girlfriend. Yeah. But then there's that, where's the smoking gun?
It don't have to be a smoking gun. It could just be a water pistol. Anything.
Lack of evidence aside, do you believe Dana Chandler is innocent?
I do. I believe she's innocent in my heart of hearts.
His organization hired a top-notch defense team to represent Dana in her high-stakes retrial. What would this new jury think?
I'm sure your stomach is turning.
Yes.
In August 2022, Dana Chandler stood trial for a second time for the murders of Mike Sisko and Karen Harkness 20 years earlier. Prosecutor Charles Kitt acknowledged the evidence the state didn't have.
This case is not based on DNA. This case is not based on hair. This case is not based on fingerprints. This case is based on jealousy, rage, and obsession.
The prosecution's case remained largely unchanged from the first trial. Haley once again took the stand.
Seeing your mom this time around, did it feel different at all?
My mom looked so different. I mean, she'd been in jail for 11 years, and it was still hard to see her. But, time had passed, and I had grown, and so I think it was a little bit easier. She really obsessed over him, and
she told the jury how her mom seemed perversely fixated on her dad and Karen.
It was a big part of my conversations with her was, where's your dad? What's he doing? And your dad did this to me, and bad talking him and Karen.
And did that continue up until his death?
Yeah.
But the prosecution told the jury it wasn't just what Dana said, it was also what she did. Like showing up in Topeka unannounced, or incessantly calling Mike and Karen.
He was distraught.
Mike's brother-in-law Mark testified about Mike's growing concern over what his ex-wife might be capable of.
Mike told me that the patterns of harassment had increased and that he feared for he and Karen's lives.
And the state argued Dana's changing alibis for the weekend of the murders were full of holes. A weekend in which her cell phone went dark for more than 24 hours. Perhaps the most chilling testimony came from Dana's friend Ann Hammer. She now believed Dana was guilty and told the jury about a road trip Dana said she took about a month before the murders.
She told me that she had driven to Kansas. She told me that she knew nobody was in the house and that she went into Mike's home through the window. After that, she did go to his girlfriend's house and sat outside her house waiting for them to come home, but they didn't show up.
Did you think that Dana's story about the drive was possibly a dry run for what she ended up being accused of?
That's absolutely what I did think of it. She's just practicing.
May it please the court.
But Dana Chandler's defense attorney, Tom Bath, reminded the jury of the glaring holes in the prosecution's case.
In 20 years, the state had no evidence whatsoever that placed Dana Chandler in Karen Harkness's home in the city of Topeka or in the state of Kansas. And that hasn't changed.
The defense argued this was a classic example of a botched investigation led by a detective with tunnel vision.
Foley essentially started on this path right from the start.
When they get their mind fixed on a suspect, that's almost like you can get a bullseye every time. You know how you get a bullseye every time, where you stick the arrow in the tree and you just draw a circle around it.
Daryl Burton attended the trial to support Dana.
And I think that's what they did with Dana. You know, he said, we got this person, and we're going to build our case around this person.
The defense highlighted Foley's many missteps, hammering him on cross-examination about the parts of the investigation he failed to document.
Did you do a report on this?
No.
You didn't even do any notes about what Dana said, did you?
No.
Right.
And taking him to task for the things he did document that later went missing.
Where is that tape, Detective?
I don't know.
As for that dry run, the defense pressed Dana's old friend on her memory.
And do you remember that some of the information you gave about Dana, you weren't sure if it was true or if it was a dream?
Absolutely.
The defense argued the rest of the prosecution's case was just noise. Dana wasn't angry or obsessed and never harassed Mike or Karen. All those phone calls, for instance, just a mom trying to reach her kids. And so what if her cell phone went dark for 27 hours? This was 2002. Service was limited, roaming charges were sky high, and people weren't tied to their phones like they are today.
2002 was a different era for cell phones. Many people's phone would not show calls if you left.
You know, for the defense, I think they were just kind of throwing their arms in the air going, just because she can't prove she was in Colorado doesn't mean she was in Kansas. You know, there's no evidence she was there either.
And in fact, said the defense, there was evidence someone else was in that house. A hair found on a shell casing did not match Dana or either of the victims.
There is reasonable doubt at every turn, and we ask you to return a verdict, not guilty, not proven. Thank you.
Jury deliberations started after 3 weeks of testimony. One day passed, then another, then another. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. This is going on almost a week.
That wasn't good. We knew it wasn't good.
I'm sure your stomach, is turning. You're getting a bad feeling here.
Yes.
On the 6th day of deliberations, the jury filed back into the courtroom.
I understand that the jury is unable to reach a unanimous verdict at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The judge declared a mistrial.
All right, thank you very much.
And the families found themselves right back where they started.
Oh, it hurt.
You've already done 1 and then now 2, and then now you have this lack of resolution.
It's a roller coaster. Yeah.
Definitely a roller coaster.
And there was no getting off as the case careened towards a 3rd trial. And this time, all bets were off. There is a big, big twist coming that you did not see coming.
Wow. Shocking.
This is the mother-daughter showdown for the ages.
Absolutely.
In the fall of 2022, despite 2 trials behind them, prosecutors decided to roll the dice again and try Dana Chandler for a 3rd time. The victims' families were relieved, but the long wait for trial wouldn't be easy. Dana was granted bond. So now she's out. You've testified against your mom twice, and now she's a free woman.
I was really nervous about her getting out on bond. I felt better because she was supposed to stay in Kansas and she'd have an ankle monitor, but still, I knew it was nothing for her to drive any distance.
Karen's friend Linda was anxious too.
Several of us, the very first trial, when we testified against her, we said, if she gets off, I'm a little concerned.
The prosecutor's decision to retry Dana was a major disappointment for her friend Daryl. He vowed to stick by her, and for the next 2.5 years, continued to raise money to keep lawyer Tom Bath on the case. How are you feeling heading into trial number 3?
I was feeling she had a good chance. And I said to Dana, I said, you know, Dana, I said, Tom is likable. I said, if he gets in front of a jury, they're going to like him.
Dana's 3rd trial began this past February in a county northwest of Topeka. The courthouse was different, but the players were the same. Until, minutes before opening statements, Dana made a stunning decision. She fired her attorneys. Dana would represent herself. She really flips the switch on this one.
Yeah, that was a blind side.
Even her staunchest supporters were dumbfounded.
I said, you know, Dana, I don't understand. What are you trying to do? What are you doing? You're not a lawyer. You need an attorney to understand court rules, procedures, and court etiquette. It's just, this is my life. This is my case, and I think I can help myself.
Counsel, are you ready to begin?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Prosecutors their now familiar case. Same motive.
That this defendant was obsessed with Mike and Karen, that she hated Mike and Karen, that she told Haley that she had thought about killing Mike.
And the same disturbing stories.
Phone harassment, rapid fire phone calls, stalking, showing up.
I looked out the blinds of his bedroom, and it was the defendant jumping on a trampoline and laughing.
When it was Dana's turn, everyone knew they were in for something different. And sure enough, she threw the typical trial playbook out the window. For her first witness, Dana called herself, speaking in a monologue about herself.
Start by stating my name. My name is Dana Chandler. I, as everyone knows, have been accused of double homicide, and I am innocent. I did not kill Mike and Karen.
With her sisters and other supporters looking on, Dana told the jury she was a woman who'd been dealt a bad hand. She said her ex-husband left her impoverished and shut out of her children's lives, and she'd endured a lonely battle against alcoholism. Yes, she said some of her behavior was ugly, like those graphic messages she'd sent Haley about her dad and Karen's sex life. But that was the alcohol talking.
I mean, seriously, Haley was 14 years old. I am just so ashamed and embarrassed about that, and I hated that I put Haley through that.
She took the blame for that, but not for all the rest. She said she was actually getting along with Mike at the time of the murders, and that all those damning stories told by Mike and Karen's families were either misrepresented or never happened.
There's been testimony that I used Haley and Dustin to spy on Mike. I stalked Mike. None of that's true.
And Dana said she hadn't changed her alibi about where she was the night of the murders. She'd slept in her car in the Colorado mountains.
This is a map of the route that I took.
As Dana moved around the courtroom, she didn't always come across like a polished attorney. She struggled with her computer. Stopped testimony to put on her puffy coat. And she complained about our cameras.
That camera back there is daylight. I find that very distasteful. I'm sitting here giving my life story with that camera pointing to me is so obnoxious to me. And I'm very uncomfortable doing that right now.
Did you worry that the jury might be sympathetic to her or think, wow, this woman is taking on this burden of being her own attorney? Maybe she didn't do this.
Yeah, it concerned me a little bit. I thought, yeah, it's possible she could be seen as sympathetic to the jury.
Of course, the fact that Dana was her own attorney meant that she got to question every witness herself, including the man she felt had tormented her for 20 years, Detective Voley.
Morning.
Good morning.
Dana worked him over on the stand, pressing him on every move he made during the investigation.
She was asking him questions that either he didn't recall or refused to acknowledge and answer. And then she would approach him with some documents, reports that he had prepared.
Well, I can see that it's not accurate because I've obviously made an error on that.
It was coming across as effective.
She used a note he'd written to portray him as a man desperate to solve the case, not for justice, but to protect his reputation, an allegation he denied.
You were feeling a great deal of pressure to solve this crime.
I always feel a great deal of pressure to solve any murder.
To the point to where you were concerned that the perceived problem, that the crime had not properly been investigated, would fall on you.
That memo lacks context.
Yet even though he turned her life upside down, Dana said the detective still couldn't produce a single piece of direct evidence that tied her to the crime.
Were there my fingerprints in the house?
No.
Were there any of my hair in the house?
No.
Was there any DNA in the house?
No.
He never found evidence that she owned or knew how to use a gun either. What was that like, having your murder suspect keeping you on the stand for 2 days, just line by line of all your work? I mean, the tables have turned. She's now interviewing you.
The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife.
Being questioned by Dana was equally surreal for Mark and Kathy.
What was bizarre for me was I was getting a drink of water right when she came to cross-examine me. And I hear this. And she's trying to put on this persona that we're old friends.
Dana accused you of having mental health issues.
Oh, yes.
Isn't it true that you're bipolar? You've been diagnosed bipolar?
No, it's not true. It was demented.
But the person who dreaded the face-to-face with Dana most was her daughter.
knowing that I was going to have to get up on the stand and be questioned by her was like upsetting my stomach to have to talk to her.
What was your strategy with her, your approach, knowing that your mom's playing the role of attorney?
I put on my game face. I remember right before I went in to testify, I remembered like a soccer pep talk that my dad gave me as a kid to get ready for the big game. Because I needed to be my best, and I needed to be ready for a fight. And just like, I can do this, you know? And I remember reminding myself where I stand. I wanted the truth. I'm telling the truth, and I'm doing the right thing. And I'm not moving.
Well, Lucille,
if Haley was Dana's child, you couldn't tell. She attacked Haley's memories, suggesting Mike was the unhinged parent after the divorce, not her.
when your dad and Karen drove up, your dad stormed over to the car, right?
Oh,
If you
no.
recall?
No, he did not.
And he started banging on the window.
What? No, he did not.
And I'm like, no, that did not happen. She was making things up.
I felt like you all...
And she made Haley revisit disagreements they'd had in the past, laying bare their fractured relationship for the jury.
Is this a good setting to explain our personal relationship?
Well, that's a lot of what this trial is about, is my relationship with you.
Despite their problems, Dana insisted she tried to be there for Haley after her father was killed.
But I did try to call you, was your testimony.
You did.
And you wouldn't answer your phone.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk to you.
You didn't want to talk to me. But I tried to talk to you, correct?
Yes.
How do you feel you did?
I feel really good. I did great.
Did you feel like your dad was with you?
I do.
Dana Chandler had her say. Now, prosecutors would have a chance to question her. A double murder case that began on a 4th of July weekend was about to end with its own fireworks.
Ms. Chandler, it is a yes or no.
I'm not going to be corralled into this little box of yes or no, Mr. Kid.
Dana Chandler had conducted her defense her way.
I think this case is a character assassination.
But the decision to represent herself came at a cost. There were constant delays as Dana sifted through documents and corralled her witnesses. She tested the judge's patience.
Ms. Chandler, I'm going to ask you to stop talking right now unless you really have something, you have a motion to make.
Just exercising my right to be heard.
By contrast, the prosecutors moved their case along like clockwork.
They know what they're doing. They've got their witnesses in order. They've all been briefed. Everybody's on the same page. Yes.
The prosecution took advantage of Dana's inexperience at key moments. Remember the gas station clerk who believed she saw Dana in Kansas the weekend of the murders? Because that woman died, the judge had ruled her story inadmissible. But Dana asked the detective a question that allowed him to talk about it.
We also have, and it hasn't been mentioned yet, a Patty Williams in Waukene, Kansas.
The prosecutor played the revelation for all it was worth, showing the jury the clerk had identified Dana in a photo lineup.
So she looked at this lineup of 6 photographs for about 10 seconds?
Yes.
And what did she say?
She pointed to the person in position 4 on the lineup and said she was about 70% sure that the woman in 4 was the woman that had been in the store.
The prosecution, I mean, these guys, they were literally running circles around Dana.
Well, they've been to law school. They've tried many cases. This is their life, their job. It's not Dana's job.
Right, and she's never tried a case ever, in her life.
The prosecutor also had a chance to do something he'd been wanting to do for years. Question Dana on the stand. By testifying, she put herself in that precarious spot.
I'm ready for Carlos.
The prosecutor asked Dana a series of yes or no questions and called her out when she refused to comply.
Ms. Chandler, is it fair to say you don't like the rules when they apply to you?
No, that's not true at all.
The rule is, when you're asked a question, answer that question and then wait for the next question. You understand that?
That is what you're asking me is not necessary, and I understand you're trying to corral me, keep me on a short leash, yes or no. I understand the tactic.
But you're not capable of doing that?
He took aim at her alibi and got her to admit that she had told different stories about that weekend.
So what you told Detective Foley is not consistent with what you told Jeff Bailey, is it?
As far as my trip to...
Ms. Chandler, it's not consistent
that
with what
part, okay. I would agree with that.
The prosecutor also pointed out the sheer number of witnesses who Dana said hadn't told the truth about her.
Tim Sisko and Kathy Boots were wrong about saying Mike saw you in his breezeway in May, approximately 6 weeks before the homicide. Is that correct?
Yes, they are absolutely wrong.
Kathy was mistaken or wrong on her testimony about seeing you jump on Mike's trampoline.
It's inaccurate that happened, absolutely.
Haley and Dustin were wrong when they said that you used them as your little spies. Yes or no?
Yes, I was not using them as my little spies.
How do you think she did on cross-examination?
And she didn't do too good. The whole trial was just painful. It's like you sitting on the shoreline and you're watching someone drown. You throw them a life preserve and they throw it back. It was just painful.
When both sides rested and the case went to the jury, Mark and Kathy were optimistic. Are you feeling good?
Yeah, I felt very confident.
I was feeling great.
And they wouldn't have to wait long for the decision. 3.5 hours after deliberations began, everyone gathered in the courtroom for the verdict.
We, the jury, find Dana Chandler guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in conflict.
The jury comes back guilty.
Yeah, guilty.
Does it feel even better this time around because of everything you've been through? That maybe this is final now?
Yes. This time with her representing herself, exposing herself with all of her stories, I feel it is over. It's fully out there. Everyone knows what happened.
Karen's son Chad was also grateful it was over.
I was elated and just felt peace and calm and even some tears of joy.
On the other side of the aisle, Daryl was despondent. How did that feel when you see Dana being cuffed and led away after weeks of fighting?
Yeah, it was crushing, devastating. She turned and she looked at her family and she blew them a kiss. And then, the sheriff took her out the back door.
23 years after Mike and Karen were killed, their families are just starting to get used to life after Dana Chandler. But for Karen's daughter, Erin, the pain of her mother's death is never far away.
As heartbroken as I am for my loss, what literally brings me to my knees is the fact that our two amazing sons will never know a life or a world with her in it.
Haley feels that ache too. She was just a teen when she lost her father. Now, she's a mother of 3. I'm sure he would have made a great grandpa to your kids.
He would have made like the best grandpa to my kids. And Karen would have been a great grandma too.
I think your dad would be proud of you for all that you've done to fight for him.
I hope my dad's proud of me. That's all I wanted.
That's all for this edition of Dateline. And check out our Talking Dateline podcast. Andrea Canning and Keith Morrison will go behind the scenes of tonight's episode, available Wednesday in the Dateline feed wherever you get your podcasts. And starting this weekend, in addition to Fridays and Saturdays, you can tune into Dateline Sundays at 10, 9 Central. We'll see you then. I'm Lester Holt. For all of us at NBC News, good night.